Okay, good evening. It's 6:15 my time in the UK. In the evening, obviously some real key um, sports news of an important nature. Of course, we've seen the Champions League and obviously the Europa League and Europa Conference League matches, knockout stages continue this evening. Of course, the Champions League, Atletico Madrid, Chelsea getting knocked out, Liverpool and Benfica, some enthralling matches and some controversy in said matches. Um, Obviously, the plans for the revamped Champions League in a couple of years' time have met with a lot of criticism from fans. A lot of fans across Europe aren't necessarily happy with the proposed new format that UEFA want to bring in for the Champions League. That's another debating point, and sometimes are saying it's basically the European Super League by the back door. Yes, there is a lot going on towards the end of the football and rugby seasons. A lot going on. Lots of controversy. Eric Ten Hag is close to being appointed Man United's new manager, replacing Ralph Rangnick. That has yet to be confirmed. They're in advanced talks at this stage. He's heavily linked with the role. Um, and there could be a massive squad clear out, obviously, at Old Trafford. And there's also plans being submitted for the refurbishment or redevelopment of Old Trafford as well. The sticking point with Old Trafford is the South Stand cannot really be developed anymore because of the railway line behind it. Although they could expand on the three other stands that are there. Or I think the best bet, the capacity is not the problem. It's the state of the stadium and the upkeep of the stadium. Now, obviously, I did some videos on some other sports news from Australia and the rest of Europe. James Maloney, former Catalan Dragon and Sydney Rooster, amongst other teams that he's played for, obviously failed a drugs test with cocaine in his system. Video I've done on that, and I'm heavily critical of how rugby league, I think, is in denial about the issues with drug use, recreational drug use, and alcohol, excessive alcohol use within the sport. Both the NRL Super League and the other semi-professional leagues um, around. I think rugby league is asleep on a ticking time bomb with the amount of allegations against current and ex-players and scandal that the sport's had. And of course, the other big news coming out of Australia is Gil McLaughlin, the AFL CEO, has announced he is standing down at the end of this season. But there are some very key important decisions the AFL has got to take, and some very important key negotiations the AFL has to take with its broadcast partners, the Players CBA for both the men and the women, and funding for AFL or Tasmania, basically. Random question: do you think the old Crystal Palace Athletic Stadium, Aquatic Centre, will ever be renovated? It does hold a special place within UK sporting history, and its cultural impact cannot be understated. Um, should it be renovated? Well, a lot of money's gone into Birmingham because of the Commonwealth Games, and London's obviously had the Olympics, and Manchester's had the Commonwealth Games, and Glasgow's had the Commonwealth Games in our lifetimes in the last 20 years. And Birmingham's about to host the Commonwealth Games, so a lot of cities have already had that sporting infrastructure and that investment put into them. But who would pay for the renovation? True, not all the money went to East London. There was a fair bit of money with the Olympics that went to Eton Dorney, which is west of London in the home counties, near to where I live. And I've been there, and it's a fantastic facility. Yes, a lot of money went to East London. There were some other facilities as well that got some funding for redevelopment and refurbishment and investment. But London as a city got a lot of taxpayer money. Plus, we've had Wembley rebuilt as well in the last 2 decades, and we've had extensions to Twickenham. Now, how much taxpayer money went into Twickenham, or if it was solely the RFU, I don't know the full facts on that one. So, London as a sporting city has had a lot of investment, be it private investment or state-funded investment. Obviously, Wimbledon got the new Plough Lane. We've seen investment at Brentford with the new stadium there, Spurs with the new White Hart Lane, Arsenal with the Emirates. So there's been a lot of money pumped into facilities in London. The question is, who pays for it? Even the demolition, who ends up footing the bill? Will it be the local borough council in London? Would it be the London Authority? Would it be a private purchase? That is the question, and at a time when the government's finances are a complete mess, that's a big open-ended question of who actually pays for any potential redevelopment, renovation, or the demolition of the Crystal Palace facility. It's still used, obviously. However, it's looking tired. It's looking worn out. Um, the question then comes, well, who's going to foot the bill for it? If it's going to be privately funded, fine. Um, if however it's publicly funded, there'll be a lot of questions raised about how much. And of course, if it's publicly funded, they always go over budget. But how much are they willing to spend on the facilities? And if it is decided to be demolished completely, what will go in its place? Housing, industry. There's a lot of those questions that need answering before anything happens. I know it's a random question, and an interesting question. Sporting infrastructure is a very important question. Though it does seem there's more of a focus now to the Midlands and the North, a big shift to the Midlands and the North. And of course, Birmingham's had a lot of money on infrastructure and the facilities for the Commonwealths. Obviously, Manchester had the Commonwealth Games 20 years ago, and of course, Glasgow had it about a decade or so ago. So there has been a lot of emphasis put upon certain cities, and most of the cities are further north that are getting the investment, be it private or state funded investment. So it will be interesting to see what comes of everything. Basically, if Unai Emery gets Villarreal out of the Champions League final, is he manager of the season? Well, I mean, Pellegrini got them to the semi final, I think, back in the day. Do not underestimate Villarreal. They're a team that's the sum of all their parts. They work together. They are a good, solid side. There's no outstanding player at Villarreal, but they've had some superstar players in the past. And if you think about it, far smaller budgets than the big clubs, both Madrid clubs and Barcelona. Much more stably run. I think is a good way to look at Villarreal. And don't forget, 15 years ago, they were a top side in Spanish football as well, and were Champions League regulars for a period. So they're not without, European history. The way Arsenal structure, I think the issues with Arsenal is not Unai Emery. I think Arsenal has got a lot of structural problems, and because of that lack of investment in the playing squad for such a long time because of the stadium, and Arsenal were very prudent in their spending, and this is where I have to give Arsenal credit for trying to live within their means after the stadium rebuild, the move from Highbury to the Emirates. They made sure that they were debt free and did it in a way that, okay, ultimately it has impacted the team on the field, but it's made sure that they are stable financially. And yeah, I mean, look, I think Unai Emery was unfairly treated, but the Arsenal playing group, much like the Man United playing group and the Tottenham playing group, underperformed for a club of their size. Those three clubs have been underperforming for the better part of a decade, if not more. Tottenham have been underperforming for a very long time as a club. Arsenal, they've won 3 FA Cups since they've been at the Emirates, so success hasn't completely eluded them. But the structure of the squad is a problem, and I think Unai Emery is very underrated as a manager. I think it just was wrong. It was the wrong manager at the wrong club. He's a good manager. He's proven that with Villarreal. With the squad that he's got there, the players want to play for him. There's a squad unity there. There's a happiness. There's a positivity around the organisation. Arsenal, they're still living in Wenger's shadow, much like Man United are still living in Sir Alex Ferguson's shadow. Very hard to replicate what those two dominant managers, did. They were very dominating personalities, and obviously they brought a lot of success with their techniques and management and how they motivated their players, and it shows how good a job they were doing with the players they had towards the end, and how difficult it actually is to maintain that consistency over two or three decades. Yeah, I think the way Unai Emery, he was dealt a harsh hand. If I'm being fair, he got Arsenal to a Europa League final, won an FA Cup final with them. So two finals in 2 years, and of course that Europa League final, it was poor performance by Arsenal on the night. They were deservedly beaten, and heavily beaten. But the way that I think Mikel Arteta again is also getting a hide into nothing. I mean, he's in his first season win silverware, but I don't think they've got the physicality in their squad and the discipline in their squad. It's a very young squad. There's a lot of young players, not enough veterans there. Part of the problem is their transfer policy since moving to the Emirates. The squad they assembled under Wenger in the early years was formidable, absolutely formidable, full of international players. You've got players who like won the Euros and the World Cup, or players who went on to win international silverware, who were playing with that squad. So fantastic. I mean, Wenger's finds in the transfer market in the first half of his tenure at Arsenal and the team he built in the late 90s to the mid 2000s was a formidable team. And then they decided to build the Emirates, and that actually ultimately affected how much money that they were able to spend in the transfer market for the best part of a decade. And that unfortunately led to the decline of the squad in quality and depth. And but then style of football evolved. And while Wenger's training techniques and the recovery techniques and the professionalism he expected his players to uphold is second to none. He did revolutionise the sport, and he was a very innovative coach. There are multiple reasons why Arsenal are in the position they are. The current ownership is part of the issue, and it takes a long time to basically rebuild a club structure from within. It doesn't happen overnight, and I think Unai Emery was treated unfairly by Arsenal. But he did the best he could with the resources he had available, and that resources also includes the players. Why are Arsenal such an appealing team to American fans? Well, at the time they were competing against Man United, the US networks obviously got really interested. Of course, David Beckham going to LA Galaxy and all that, but the US networks were looking at this rivalry, the biggest rivalry I think in the Premier League era, in my opinion, for how heated it was on the field and off the field. Um, and the rivalry was sold to the American fan base, quite frankly, and they've got American investment, so that's another reason why it's appealing to American fans. Um, yeah, American investment, and when the Premier League exploded in the late 90s to the mid 2000s, that's when the US networks really started um, to um, pick up the Premier League more and show more games. And of course, Arsenal, Man United were taking lumps out of each other in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and then Chelsea come along with the Abramovich's money to upset the apple cart. But there was a period of about 6 years where, apart from Blackburn in the Premier League, it was those two going head to head. In the Invincibles era, I mean, Americans love record breakers, and that became an amazing tale, and it's an amazing squad they had together. Daniel Kinahan, I have watched documentaries on the Kinahan boxing link between organised crime and boxing. What's he done now? Please tell me he's been arrested, because I watched several documentaries about his boxing promotion. I remember the shooting in the Dublin hotel. Let me have a little look at Kinahan. Da, 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 da. Let's have a look about this dodgy Irish SOB. Oh, MTK Global. Let's have a look. Yeah, well, the fact that the High Court of Ireland, so it's like our version of the High Court in London, and the High Court in Scotland, because Scottish legal system is different, have named him as a senior figure in organised crime on a global scale. So if a judiciary, a um, pretty transparent judiciary, the Irish judiciary is not corrupt at all in comparison to others. Um, um, yeah, uh, you know, there's now a reward poster up for him of $5 million. Um, the DEA are now after him, so I mean, he's MTK Global's now registered out of Dubai. Um, it's US government put sanctions on him and his group, and yeah, I've read about that. I watched the documentary. There was a documentary on BBC Panorama last year, and it was a two-parter, and I watched it, and I was not surprised by what I saw. That, that, and I've met Barry McGuigan, who's an ex-boxer, and he's now a trainer and an agent for boxers, and boxing and organised crime are never far from each other. But I watched that, and the Dublin hotel shooting at the weigh-in was the moment that he reaches international recognition of who he is. Um, but yeah, there's been an ongoing gangland feud in Ireland and overseas that's resulted in at least 18 people being murdered since 2015. So that's more than one high pro. That's more than what is it? That's nearly two high-profile crime figures per year getting gunned down in public places. Others have been injured as well. There've been multiple car bombings and shootings. Um, I'm surprised that the DEA waited this long to put up a most wanted poster, and I'm surprised that the UAE is allowing him to stay over there considering they're allies with the US, and it looks bad if they're protecting a wanted fugitive. Um, People in the rest of the UK have also been aware of what he's been doing because I've got some Irish travellers as neighbours and they're boxers, and it's common knowledge that um, he approaches a lot of the amateurs and lower ranking professionals in the boxing world. And they are professional boxers across the road from me. It's common knowledge. I've got friends who are boxing trainers who had their own gyms and are professionals who train at their gyms. It's common knowledge in the boxing world and in the fraternity that it's not a secret basically. Um, but until the shooting in the Dublin hotel, the boxing weigh-in, no one knew. The general public didn't know who this person was really outside of Ireland. Um, the fan base between Spurs and Arsenal. Arsenal have had more silverware and more success. The fan base is about equal size. North London is divided quite evenly. Uh, there is no real division, however, in like one area of North London being Arsenal and one area being Tottenham. It's you can have neighbours being an Arsenal and Tottenham fan. A lot of them get on, but there's a big minority between both fan bases who um, of the hooligan element, and it gets quite visceral and nasty. The whole Sol Campbell transfer back in the day was a key moment in British sporting history, and the abuse he then copped for the best part of a decade from Spurs fans, even to this day, he still gets death threats and abuse online and in the mail and on and in public. So it's a vicious rivalry, very vicious rivalry. I wouldn't say there's more Arsenal fans. I think the fan bases are about equal size, um, and the rivalry is fierce. Just Arsenal have had more success, if we're being honest. Everyone in Ireland, yeah, we read that one. It, the stadiums are about comparable size as well. Although I don't understand why Tottenham decided to redevelop their stadium and put themselves in stupid amounts of debt with no trophies, but it is what it is. I'm not even sure why Arsenal built the Emirates. It's be honest. I thought Highbury was a fantastic traditional stadium, and we're losing them, quite frankly. But yeah, I mean, North London. There's areas of North London that are wealthy, and there's areas of North London that are very, very poor. And yeah, the the antagonism between both sets of fans it's a real heated rivalry. Um, It depends. The Crystal Palace, Millwall, Charlton, all south of the river. That their fan bases sort of get blurred these days. Brentford, Fulham, and Chelsea, their fan bases, if we're talking about West London, again blurred. East London with West Ham and Leighton Orient, that's pretty blurred as well. And then North London and Wimbledon are in South West London. So you've got the core areas around the clubs themselves, and then in the suburbs it just gets particularly blurred. But there's catchment areas. How do lower level London clubs compete with the big boys? What is their sell to draw fans in such a saturated sports market? Well, you've got, if you count Greater London and the surrounding areas, you've got about 25 million people in the Greater London conurbation. So where I live is technically on the edge of that. If I'm 2 miles down the road, I'm part of it. As it currently stands, I'm part of the Reading, metropolitan area, and the Thames Valley. But you not only got London, and then what's inside the M25, which is the orbital, what you would call the freeway, what we call the motorway, but you've got the surrounding communities as well. That's classed as the London metropolitan area, which encompasses anywhere, but depending on definition, between 20 to 35 million people. It extends into Essex as far as Southend. It extends into Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Berkshire, a large chunk of Surrey, Sussex, Kent. It extends out quite a way. Um, so it, it's quite a large catchment area for all the professional clubs, and Wimbledon have been in the top flight, and Charlton have been in the top flight before the old Division One, and now currently the Premier League. Millwall have actually been in the top division as well. Leighton Orient have gone up and down the leagues in their history. For the most part, been a football league club. Brentford obviously haven't been in the top flight until this season since 1948, but they've had a solid fan base for a very long time. It There are other clubs in the non-league as well who play in London, so it's not just the top four divisions. Technically, Barnet, could you class Barnet as part of Greater London now? Um, you've got Dagenham and Redbridge on right on the edge of London and Essex, um, and then you've got the clubs like Gillingham that are just outside, and Southend that are just outside London. Um, but it's an interesting one because London's such a multicultural, multinational, global city that you will have people from all over the world, and a lot of people from outside London moved in, and a lot of people from London have moved out. So you will find fans of all the London clubs living outside London, and then you've got clubs like Watford just on the edge, and clubs like Reading, just a little bit further out. So it it's fair to say that traditionally each club had its own traditional catchment area around the stadium and around the community. Sutton United, yeah, 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 you got them as well. There's clubs in the non-league that are professional as well. Um, you could basically name your own football division, the London division, basically, if we were to do a franchise model. There's enough professional and semi-pro clubs to have your own league, equivalent to the size of the Scottish Premiership and the Scottish Championship. There are enough clubs in London playing at a high enough level, with professionals on their books or fully professional in all the divisions, to basically form your own league system. It's the same with the West Midlands. It's a very congested area in the West Midlands, although a little bit more tribal. Birmingham's obviously a city split three ways. Greater Manchester and the North, and Liverpool and the rest of the Northwest. You could have your own football league from just the Northwest alone. And I saw a map describing the catchment areas for all the clubs in Manchester, Liverpool, and the Northwest. It's ridiculous. Greater Manchester, Merseyside, and the rest of Lancashire is ridiculous as well. The amount of professional football league clubs that are currently playing in the top four divisions of English football. Again, you could have your own separate division, your own separate league. Same with South Yorkshire. Yeah, Millwall's interesting. Very interesting. But yeah, there are some clubs that also have catchment areas outside London as well. Like West Ham will attract a lot of fans from Essex. Same with Leighton Orient; they'll attract fans from Essex and South Suffolk, to their fan base. Uh, Chelsea and Fulham and Brentford will attract fans from Berkshire, basically. QPR as well is another club that I forgot about. Wimbledon will attract fans from Surrey. Palace will attract fans from like Sussex and bits of Surrey. Charlton will attract fans from Kent, who will happily commute into the city to watch games. Because London's got places like part of London, there's overspill towns and cities where people left London after World War II and settled in what we call the home counties, much like in Birmingham in the West Midlands and Manchester and Liverpool. Other towns had an influx of, and cities had an influx of people moving out of these areas into new areas, and that blurs the traditional catchment areas for fan base. Some people will support their borough's team in a Premier League club, but what happens when their local team ends up in the Premier League? It's a difficult one. Hey, Jordan and Chester, who do you guys support? Just curious. I know Southgate is Man U. I know that Chester is a Swindon Town fan. And Jordan, I believe, is Birmingham City. So there you go. It's Birmingham City and Swindon Town. Both clubs have been in the Premier League in their history, and Swindon Town has the unenviable record having the worst defensive record in Premier League history, which is something that no club wants. Yeah, I do remember I do remember my moderators. There's a reason why you're moderators. But I saw a map, like a Venn diagram of the catchment areas, what they would class as the catchment areas, based upon league position as of last season, and of the northwest of England. You could do the same for London in theory. In practice, you would see how blurred it gets. Because look at the northwest, where you've got Man United, Man City. Bury have obviously gone out of business, but Bury's on the map. Bolton, Wigan, Blackburn, Burnley, Accrington, Stanley, Preston North End, Fleetwood Town, Morecambe, Liverpool, Everton, Tranmere, Salford City. I think I've got all of the clubs that are professional in the Football League there, and they have these catchment areas, and they all blur together. Regardless of what league the clubs are in, they all blur together if you work out, okay, we'll go by population size or what the league they're in, and then global reach and all that. It doesn't matter. It's not quite like the US where you've got more space between major urban areas and major cities. It is, we've got more densely populated areas and a very smaller land space, basically. And it's the same with the northeast, with Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Doncaster, Hull, Hartlepool. Again, really congested in a very small group. Grimsby, all the way from Grimsby all the way up to. I mean, Scarborough used to be a professional football league club, all the way up to Newcastle. About 9 or 10 clubs in a very narrow coastal strip of northeast England. And then you've got South Yorkshire, you've got Barnsley, you've got Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday, then you've got Leeds and Bradford, you've got it's Rotherham, obviously York, AFC York, who have been in the Football League in the past. It gets very congested in small geographical areas, really. Bradford City, as I said, Bradford Park Avenue, they're in the non-league and they've won the FA Cup in their history. A historical club and a very important club as well for the direction of English football. And then it's the same in the southwest. It's a bit more spaced out. Bristol's got Bristol City and Bristol Rovers. You've got Yeovil Town. You've got Exeter City. You've got Plymouth Argyle. You've got some non-league clubs in Dorset. Then you get Bournemouth and Southampton and Portsmouth on the south coast, all very close together. Havant and Waterlooville, if you really want to look at the non-league. And then going along, got Brighton Hove Albion. So there's you've got Crawley in between London and Brighton. So there's a fair bit of congestion It doesn't matter where you are. Like West Midlands, for example, I think I would count Coventry in the West Midlands. You've got Coventry, Birmingham City, Aston Villa, West Bromwich Albion, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Walsall, Kidderminster Harriers in the non-league. You've got Cheltenham Town. I would class that as the West Midlands. Just it's Gloucestershire. You've got Shrewsbury and Wrexham. Um, you know, it start then you start it starts suddenly see how fan base, fan catchment areas become quite difficult. Um, and because of the modern economy, people just go with the workers. They're going to go with the workers. People move around a lot, so you'll see fans almost every football club in the non-league in the football. Solihull, yeah, Solihull Moors, yes, and they're having a good season. You've got Stockport County been in the Football League in the past, in Greater Manchester. So yeah, you have this map of the UK, and then it becomes really just a mess. Maidenhead United, if they ever get out the non-league into the League Two, um, it does start become very very congested when you look at fan base and catchment area and how big do you class a catchment area? How big do you class a fan base? Because the interesting thing is European football has been picked up in the US, and you've got I think almost every single club has at least some US fans. And I'm not joking. There seems to be major drug use in the southwest of England. Does that have any effect on the sports there? That is a known fact. It depends on. I mean, I've got friends and family in the southwest, and I'm telling you now, yeah, that is a correct assessment. But there's major drug use in every urban area, and then it how does it have an effect? The southwest is not as wealthy as it should be. As an area of the UK, it needs investment outside of the major towns, the rural areas. Chronic lack of investment, lack of jobs, low wages. Um, Heavily reliant on tourism and the service sector, which obviously during COVID was hammered. So a lot of people were, struggling for work. Um, and the transport infrastructure is limited in areas of the southwest. But it's like rural America with especially Cornwall and large parts of Devon, very few population centres and a lot of small towns and villages, which is obviously different to the US, whereas some cities in the US have only got a couple hundred people in them, but they're being chartered as a city. Um, and so automatically, yeah, you're far away from the big urban areas and big industrial areas. And when you're heavily reliant on the tertiary sector, so tourism and services, so restaurants, pubs, that kind of thing, for your gross domestic product, things like COVID or bad weather do have a massive impact on employment industry and how much money the region makes. So Cornwall and parts of Devon are very very poor. Very, very poor. And Cornwall really is actually it's got the lowest average salaries in the mainland of the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. As a whole, county, there's a couple of population centres, Truro, Newquay, which is very popular for professional surfers. So Newquay's the surf capital of the UK. Penzance, Falmouth. But when I say population centres, not one of them is bigger than 20,000 people. And there's a lot of small villages. It is a very very interesting place, but it's very isolated in the sense that it's geographically very isolated, very rural, and not a lot of money. And the Cornish Pirates, no, not the Cornish Pirates, they're professional rugby union, and they got now the Cornish Rugby League Football Club, which has started this season. So both codes of rugby are played in Cornwall to a high standard, in the professional league structures. And yeah, Wales is very similar outside of Swansea and Cardiff and Wrexham. Really heavily reliant on tourism, heavily reliant on the service sector, or agriculture, very rural. Huge tracts of isolated areas. There's like Aberystwyth is a university city, so that's actually quite affluent in comparison to the rest of the area. of central mid central Wales that it's in. But yeah, for the most part, outside of Cardiff and Swansea, post-industrial, high unemployment, low wages, lack of investment, lack of modern infrastructure in places, um, which does ultimately have an impact on the ability to support a professional sports team, or actually sustain a professional sports team. Um, and if we're discussing that, we've got to look at Welsh Rugby Union and Welsh Rugby League in the financial crisis, basically rugby, which is the national sport, that both codes that rugby finds itself in. It's in terrible financial. I'm taking a jumper off. It's too warm. That's better. That's it. My hair's getting. But yeah, no, rugby union and rugby league are financially really struggling and have done for a long time. And you could argue that the funding models and investment and some of the decisions taken in regards to getting investment and sponsorships and a whole host of other issues. And of course, there's also parts of Scotland that are also exceptionally rural, low population, sparsely populated or deprived areas with low incomes, and again, and the Scottish sports in a similar situation financially. Um, Even Rangers and Celtic have had their financial problems. Hearts and Hibs have had their financial problems. So the big clubs in Scotland have had money issues in the past, and it's these are day to day issues that need to be discussed. When surprised plus Aberystwyth and Port Talbot done it. Port Talbot actually no, it's not next Swansea. It's the the you got the Ospreys. No, Port Talbot actually covers the Dragons. United Rugby Championships team. That's the one. Newport Gwent, and Port Talbot's actually in Newport Gwent, I believe. But Port Talbot is not a particularly nice place to live. I'll give you that. Port Talbot. I've been watching Super Rugby, the top universities from England, Wales, and Scotland. British University Championship. Right. So it's better run than most of the leagues in these countries. Um, it's university, so it's amateur. But at the same time, the universities are well-funded institutions. The university sports programs are like Loughborough, for example, and some in Scotland as well, are second to none. Sheffield, I think it's Sheffield. Is it Sheffield Hallam? That's the sports university. Well, has a big sports course. I know St Andrews obviously has a very good golf team. Um, Oxford and Cambridge, obviously, and Durham have got very good rugby teams. My cousin played for Durham. Obviously, Loughborough. Yeah, some of the universities do have some really good sports programs, regardless if it's rugby or rugby league or ice hockey. Some of them have some really good sports programs that actually do churn out professional athletes on a regular scale. Um, that's a well-known fact. Not on the same level as the US and Canada, but we put a different emphasis on our sport here. It's normally developed with academies and at grassroots level in community clubs, whereas in America, the NCAA system has a big part to play in the development of athletic talent. In all the major sports, all the professional sports in the US and Canada, the NCAA has a major part to play in athlete development, for right or wrong. For right or wrong, there's less emphasis in Europe on the university sporting system for most of the professional athletes that you see. And it's the same can be said in Australia and New Zealand. It's again the grassroots level clubs. They do the talent scouting. They bring them into the system. If the individual player wants to do a university course, they can. Avon is the Welsh Premier team of Port Talbot, part of the Ospreys region. I knew that. Well, the Welsh Premiership, as in rugby union, are each of the four regions in the United Rugby Championship, that they'll have a catchment area of clubs that they can recruit talent from without penalty, much like rugby league in Australia. With reserve grade and the catchment area of feeder clubs and SCG Ball, where they have their junior football catchment areas where they can scout and develop talent into their system. And then I think it's about 15 or 16 that another club can come in and offer a youth player a contract. Um, and that works rather well um, at the moment. Some clubs have got better youth systems than others. That's a criticism labelled at several clubs in the NRL. Um, and so, and it's a system that's worked well for rugby league for over 100 years in Australia. Um, that's the difference between a lot of the Commonwealth nations and except Canada and the European nations and even the African nations that are ex colonies and stuff compared to the US system and to a certain extent the Canadian system. They're it's the youth development is done by the parent club rather than you go to a junior league and then a minor league and you get drafted. There's a lot of the club will scout youth players in youth leagues or amateur players in the lower leagues or semi-professionals, scout them, develop them, and then bring them into the main side. Now, if I can circle back to some of the videos, obviously that I've done this week. Obviously, Chris Silverwood being named as Sri Lanka's new Test coach. That's a very interesting appointment. You've obviously got Gil McLaughlin standing down, announcing he's standing down as the AFL CEO at the end of the season. And I think how he's handled the COVID situation and, of course, the Essendon doping peptide scandal at the beginning of his time in charge 8 years ago, I think he's had to fight a few fires with the AFL. And they're going into TV negotiations for the next TV deal and CBAs with the players. So he's actually got a fair bit to do in his last few months in charge before he hands over to his successor, whoever that may be. And what the AFL commissioners have been saying is it's going to be an internal appointment. I'm not overly comfortable with that necessarily. I like what the NRL have done by thinking outside the box with Andrew Abdo and Peter Volandis. They've not been involved with the NRL for that long and the Australian Rugby League Commission for a very long time. Yes, Andrew Abdo was an internal appointment replacing Todd Greenberg, but he had not been with the organisation long. And the same with Peter Volandis in regards to the Australian Rugby League Commission, had not been in that role very long before he really took control during the COVID period, as I like to call it. But they are not rugby league men. They are outside thinkers. They're outside the box. Andrew Abdo is a commercial side of things, and Peter Volandis is horse racing. Maybe that's what some sports need, like the FA and the RFL and the RFU and the Welsh Union. Maybe appointing someone who's run another sport at a high level or been involved commercially in the commercial department of a sport at a high level, bring them in, because what I'm seeing, especially with European sports, is complete misgovernance. Complete misgovernance. Poor governance, weak governance, however you want to label it. And fans are getting frustrated with how, look at the Champions League reformatting idea that's yet to be fully ratified, but we do know in the 2024-2025 season that the Champions League format will change. Whether it's in the format that UEFA want or it has to be tweaked again because fans aren't happy. And, it. And Florentino Perez has come out and said that he's going to come back with a new idea for the European Super League. So that's not going away, but they're now irrelevant because it's not going to happen if they think they can take us for mugs. UEFA has been heavily criticised for a lot of its decisions it's taken since 1992. A lot of its decisions in regards to the European Cup competitions that it has in place, the rebranding, the reformatting, dropping the Cup Winners' Cup, bringing in the Conference League, the Europa Conference League, the format of the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League as they currently stand, um, moving away from straight knockout, home and away ties to group stages and then knockouts, um, and the devaluation of the domestic leagues and cup competitions over a significant period of time. And the UEFA coefficient is a flawed system as well because it actually disadvantages every other league apart from the big five. It heavily favours five leagues over the rest of the leagues that make up UEFA. And part of the reason is getting rid of the Cup Winners' Cup and reforming that, reformatting the Champions League and Europa League to group stages, and that benefits the wealthier or the big five leagues, basically the wealthier clubs in the big five leagues. And it's not for the better of football generally, because I think the last team to win the Champions League from outside the top five leagues in Europe was Porto in 2004. Let that sink in. Porto was the last club outside of the French, Italian, German, English, and Spanish leagues to win the Champions League. Porto. That tells you all you need to know. And the last club outside the big five leagues to win the Europa League was Zenit St. Petersburg in 2008. In a final that was between two clubs that aren't in the top five leagues, in a Russian club and a Scottish club. That tells you everything you need to know about the direction UEFA has taken in the last decade and a half, and how the UEFA coefficient actually harms every other league apart from five. I've looked at the formatted plans. It's another reason why I don't watch the Champions League and Europa League anymore. It's another reason not to watch the European Cup competitions anymore. It's another reason to fall out of our love with club football. I still like my international football, and I will still watch the FA Cup because it's just the most historical competition in the world. But it's just another reason not to watch league football or European Cup competition football. Bodo Glimt win the Conference League, it would be the best justification. True, but if there's someone, let's say someone like a Leicester wins it, again, it's one of the top five leagues taking home the silverware. But if Bodo do it, that gives false justification for UEFA because they're still going to go ahead with the Champions League revamp, which will then also impact the Europa League and Conference League as well. Because again, the UEFA coefficient and historical coefficient rankings for the previous 5 years will also be taken into consideration, which then again benefits the big five leagues. So it doesn't matter if Bodo Glimt win it. It would be great if they did, but it gives added justification for UEFA's direction they want to take with the European competitions that they are in charge of. And I don't necessarily think, well, it's great for Norwegian football and gives a boost to the Norwegian coefficient for their league. We shouldn't have the coefficient in the first place. Because if we had kept the traditional formats of the old three European competitions, Cup Winners' Cup, what became the Champions League, the European Cup, and the UEFA Cup, we don't need the UEFA coefficient. But unfortunately, we have the UEFA coefficient, which is the most stupid, biased way of working out how many clubs qualify from this league or that league, and there are some bang average sides qualifying for European football who shouldn't be there. Historically, would have never made it. Bang average sides that are appalling, basically. And while it's a good thing for Norwegian football because of the flawed, let me get a drink. I'm thirsty. Because of the flawed UEFA coefficient, which I don't like. It does harm rather than it hinders rather than helps those non big five leagues. Oh, I love the sound of a bottle of Coca-Cola opening. it it does give a little bit of justification for UEFA, but we don't want to give UEFA justification for creating a competition that means 5 leagues get their average size that otherwise wouldn't make European qualification playing in Europe. And how the French league can be classed as one of the big five when they've only had one European Cup winner in Marseille tells you all you need to know, really. Um, the top European honour has only been won by a French club once. Other European honours have been won by French clubs, yes, but Marseille is the only French club to win the top European honour ever in a season when they were embroiled in a match fixing scandal. So there you go. Another note: the Portuguese league was the fifth biggest back in '04. So the last 3 non-big fives when it was Red. You could argue Red Star Belgrade, but if we're going by the current top five, the Portuguese league currently is the sixth. But yeah, the last team from not one of the big five to win is currently is Porto. Red Star Belgrade '91. Well, you can see what's happened to European football, can't you? '92 is the year that the Champions League is rebranded and the first reformat, with the TV deal and the money. And of course, Yugoslavia is in the midst of a civil collapse and a breakup, and that impacted Dinamo Zagreb, Hajduk Split, Red Star Belgrade, um, you know, and the big clubs in Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia. In fact, the whole Yugoslav league system collapsed pretty much overnight, and their clubs have never fully recovered. Um, and you, the Champions League era, I think, is the worst era for European club football. In regards to the UEFA coefficients brought in, the TV money, the greed. The clubs are now calling the tune to UEFA about how they want it formatted for pure greed purposes, whereas the managers, the players, and the fans likes the old format and want the old format. The club owners and the club directors are the ones who want that, and UEFA want that. And yeah, that's the best way I can describe it. You won't see a Red Star Belgrade win a Champions League ever again. Ever again. I mean, those days are done. And it's the way that a handful of clubs in 5 or 6 leagues, I'm going to count the Portuguese league in there, have got all the money basically, and don't want to share it with the rest, and that's creating divisions within their own leagues. And yeah, uh, this is where the modern era, the quality of football, I think, is lesser now than what it was 20 years ago. There is too much money in the sport, not enough accountability, um, poor governance across from national to European level to UEFA, and of course FIFA with the corruption, but really disjointed poor governance, weakly enforced rules, um, and regular reformats of the champions. This would be the third reformatting since 1992. Knockouts, so rebranding, 97 first reformatting, another reformatting, and another reformatting. Be the third or fourth. It's yeah. Unless Ajax or a Turkish team wins something, that again will be very difficult because of the coefficient, which, in my opinion, again is a biased coefficient towards a handful of clubs in 5 or 6 leagues. Because Portugal and the French league are basically the same in quality. The Portuguese league is smaller but produces higher quality players. Um, and for a season was actually above the French league on the coefficient standings as well. Just saying. But Unfortunately, the modern era, um, Scandinavia, Central and Eastern Europe, and Greece have unfortunately been left behind. Whereas in the past, they had some great European nights. The Cup Winners' Cup was an amazing thing because it was a level playing field across the whole of Europe. The UEFA Cup was more of a level playing field across the whole of Europe until recently, with the rebranding and the reformatting of the Europa League and the Champions League, when it was literally the European Cup. And in the early era of the Champions League until '97 was again a pretty even playing field. And unfortunately, over the last 25 years, the direction has unfortunately gone in the favour of greed, and it's damaged the game, in my opinion, very irreparably. Um, and could you even class a Turkish team as a European team? There, it's only 15% of its landmass is actually in Europe, and only I think is it one or two of the Istanbul clubs is on the European side of the Bosporus. The majority of the Turkish league plays in Asia. There you go, on the Asian side of Turkey. So, could you really class Turkey? Turkey's an interesting one because it's a crossroads between Europe and Asia. It spans two continents, and it's an amazing country, amazing history, amazing people, and they take their football very seriously, very seriously. They've had some really world class players as well. Would I like to see Ajax win it? Absolutely. Would I like to see PSV Eindhoven or Feyenoord? They've had success in their past as well in Europe. That'd be brilliant. AZ Alkmaar, for example, it would be brilliant to see a Dutch club win some European honours other than Ajax, because that would again screw up the UEFA coefficient that they've so painstakingly put in place. And the Dutch clubs have got a great history in Europe. They do. Um, Besiktas, I think, or Besiktas. Oh, Başakşehir. Oh, Başakşehir. One of the weaker of the Turkish Istanbul clubs, because Besiktas is bigger and they're not great. You've got Fenerbahce. There's a couple of others as well. Um, I understand why Turkey's part of UEFA. They've got a lot of cultural links with European history, with the European continent. Um, but then Israel is part of UEFA. So you've got Maccabi Haifa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. You're thinking to yourself, you're in the Middle East. Like, you're closer to Cairo than you are to Athens or Ankara or whatever. Azerbaijan's class is part of Europe, the continental shelf, the continental divide. Hey Dan, if you still here, go type in YouTube Graham Souness. Oh God, the Graham Souness, Fenerbahce, Galatasaray. He started a riot. Um, God, how was he Southampton and Blackburn manager? He does my nut. I mean, fiery, controversial character. Um, That'll be interesting if Russia decides to leave UEFA and other European governing bodies and goes into an Asian governing body. That'd be really interesting. But a lot of the other former, I mean, Kazakhstan is technically classed as part of Europe. Again, because the Ural Mountains, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia are classed as part of Europe as well, for political reasons and sort of geographical. It will be interesting. It's to do Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia technically are because of the Ural Mountains being the dividing line geographically, and they have closer ties with Europe than Asia, ironically, and economically. It, there's a lot of agreements in there. They're technically parts of Kazakhstan are technically part of the European continental shelf. It's weird. I'm not going to go into geography. It's for the other channel. But their clubs compete in European sanctioned UEFA competitions. and other European competitions. Kazakhstan's an interesting country because again, it's but a little bit is technically in Europe geographically with the plate boundary between the Eurasian plate and the Asian plate, but it's like Russia. 75% of its countries in Asia, but there is a part of it that is technically European in geography, not necessarily in culture. Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, yeah, they are technically actually in Europe. And they're very Western leaning as well. Apart from Azerbaijan's a little bit of a crossroads, but Armenia and Georgia are very Western leaning in their foreign policy. And technically they are classed as part of Eastern Europe. It's weird. It's to do with the Soviet Union. It's to do with the Ural Mountains being the dividing line between geographically Europe and geographically Asia. It's don't even get me started on geography. But yeah, they've signed up to UEFA. They've signed up to the Union of European Council of Europe. They're part of the Council of Europe. Um, European Council on Human Rights. They're part of a lot of organisations, and sport is a big part of their culture. But yes, Israel is just weird. How's that part of Europe? I have no idea. Uh, Good evening. Good to see you in the chat. Who's better right now, Liverpool or Man City? It's about even, and that the result the other night proves that it is about even, in my opinion. They're both through to the Champions League semi-finals. There's a point between them in the league. Uh, it really is coming down to the wire. Obviously, Man City have in the last few years won more trophies than Liverpool, but they still can't win the Champions League, and their record in the FA Cup isn't good enough, in my opinion. But Liverpool just won the League Cup. No. Now the Caucasus. Technically, they're north of the Caucasus. That makes sense. Um, their southern borders with Turkey and Iran, but technically they're north of the Caucasus Mountains, which is the old division between Europe and Asia as well, with the Kievian Rus. Yes, I am sad that I know that. Although parts of the territory technically geographically are in Asia, it's weird, I know. But culturally as well, Europe. 1922 French teams, two German teams in semi-finals, two English, two Spanish. What's going on with Italian? Why can't they seem to compete? Why? That's an interesting one. Atalanta did get in there in between. Uh, um, Atalanta is the only Italian club to make the semi-finals in the last three seasons. I don't know. I think the Euro success of the Italian national side masked a lot of the deficiencies. Although the Italian league is more competitive than what it was when Inter and Juventus had their dominant spells over the last 15 or so years. Only one Italian side's made a European final. That was Inter in the Europa League, and only one side's made a Champions League semi-final in Atalanta. I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, under the UEFA coefficient, their class is one of the top five, top six leagues. But I mean, AC Milan and Inter, their glory days are behind them in regards to European football by some distance. And I think Atalanta's been very refreshing to see them, obviously, in the European competitions again. Very refreshing to see them in the last few seasons and how they play the game and their style of play and their high energy and their high press and their fast-paced play. I think Italy's in a transition period league-wise and the national side. They're in a transition period. Is the best way to describe Italian football right now. Is a transition period. I can't be any more brutally honest than that. The best way I can describe Italian football right now. There is no other way to describe it, quite frankly, as things currently stand. I would argue, yes, Italian football is definitely in a transition phase. and has been obviously for a while. I would say for about 15 years. Still a great league to watch. Still some great players play in Italy. But it is what it is. Back in the 90s when the star, that'd be like Uzbekistan or Tajikistan or someone like that, or Turkmenistan. Probably be one of them. Probably Uzbekistan, I think. Um, it's to do with money. Let me just get comfy on bed because my back's killing me, and I've got rash knees, my back hurts, my shoulder hurts. Get this in a good position so the light doesn't affect it too much. Yeah, it'd be someone like Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan. They're the ones that border Kazakhstan directly, and it's because the USSR compete in UEFA competitions, and it's a difficult one. I think it's Uzbekistan. I think, and it's to do with money. It's to do with what they can bring to UEFA financially and money wise, and also the quality of their league depth as well, and infrastructure is another big one. We UEFA are the dumping other countries that should be playing in other confederations. Uh, Turkey's been playing in UEFA for years, a long time, and there's been some great European nights from Turkish clubs. Not just Istanbul clubs, either there's some other clubs outside of Istanbul that have played in European competitions. And rightly so, because the Turkish league is real fun to watch. And the fans, the energy and the colour and the atmosphere they bring is second to none. And it's an amazing country, it's Turkey. Uh, um, they really they bring something to the party, really, and same with the Cypriot clubs as well, and the Greek clubs. I mean, that the Balkans and Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus, their fans are just the energy they bring, um, be at home or when they travel. They are a passionate bunch by some margin. Whether you agree on some of the fans' antics or the ultras' antics, I remember the UEFA Cup final, Arsenal Galatasaray. That was not pleasant, and then Leeds was also as well in the semi final. It wasn't. That was not pleasant. I'll tell you that. What happened in the was it 2000? I think it was 2000. It was 2000, and Arsenal lost on the night. Juve, Inter, AC, and Napoli are miles away from the Man City. I wouldn't say they're miles away. Atalanta gave it a good shot last season and got to the semi-finals, and I was praying for Atalanta to make the final. I really was, because that would have been a big FU to the 12 Super League clubs. That really would have been a big FU to Super League, European Super League clubs that were already fomenting their idea. That would have been a massive two fingers to them. Big up yours. Um, but it just, unfortunately, they couldn't win that semi final. But the way Atalanta play is very similar to Liverpool. Actually, they play a very similar formation, a very similar style of play, and it's very effective. It's the best style of play I think in football right now is that tactic. I'm not saying any tactic is wrong, but I like how Atletico Madrid play by roughing up the opposition and getting gnarly with them. I like that. And fans yesterday on the social media this morning were giving it all the disgusting. I like how Atletico play because it's effective. And Atalanta, yeah, but they're still a good side, and you know, if they made that final, who knows what would have happened? But they made a Champions League semi-final, and they're a good side in Serie A. I mean, uh, and yeah, that's my personal opinion. I like Atalanta. They're my Italian club that I follow. Um, the fan base is ridiculously passionate. and yeah, not you know it's what it is. If Birmingham City ever get back into Europe or Premier League, I'd rather go to Serbia or Russia than Turkey. Oh, you are asking for trouble. um, yes, the Balkans is not a place you want to get arrested in, my friend. Really isn't. And you have to remember a lot of Balkan fans and Russian fans have also got links to paramilitary organisations, so they kill people for fun. Oh yeah, the sporting club dynamic. So that's a very European thing, where Scandinavia and the Balkans and Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean European countries will have one club for about nine different sports. Um, and the members have a share in their club for ownership. So they elect club presidents and club CEOs, and it's the same with the South American model as well. There's fan members. There's a more direct link with the fan base. Um, yeah, I mean, look, Barcelona is obviously famous for its football club, its football arm, but it's got roller hockey in there. It's got handball. It's got tennis, pelota, which is a Spanish niche sport. It's got cycling. It's got swimming. It's the same with all the Spanish clubs, really. Same with a lot of the Scandinavian clubs. We'll have an ice hockey, a basketball, a bandy, swimming, cycling, boxing, you name it. It's a very European dynamic. Although some of the football clubs that we have in the Football League now were multi-sports clubs at some point. I think Sheffield Wednesday actually had a cricket arm at one point. Um, so it is the European model, and we went down the path of separating our clubs into the separate sports and having them as separate entities, whereas the Europeans generally keep their different sports under one umbrella. I mean, PSG had a rugby league team at one point that played in the Super League. There you go. Didn't last very long, and they weren't very good, but they had that. The dream quarter final of the Champions League would be Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, Man City, Barcelona. I wouldn't have Man City in there, and I wouldn't have uh, Juventus in there personally. But that will then suit the European Super League theory that, well, we are the ones who dominate it. That's why I wanted Atalanta to win a couple of seasons ago, and why I want Villarreal to win now. It gives a big FU to the European Super League. A lot of our football teams now have a women's team, but it's true. And same with rugby league and rugby union as well. There's a women's division of the club. Um, I mean, again, it comes down to finance. With the way football finance is, and to a certain extent, rugby league and rugby union finances, unless you are a financially viable club or you've got a um, very wealthy owner or very wealthy because of success, um, it's a problem. Now, this is where I want Leicester to do well. I have a soft spot for Leicester. I like how the club's run. Um, I like the owners may be foreign, but they have a connection with the community. They do a lot of community outreach. They've invested in community projects. Their training facilities that was spent with the Harry Maguire money. They invested very very wisely, um, and they've got a great rapport with the local community. The community's bought in to both Leicester teams, Leicester Tigers and Leicester City Football Club. Um, so and even to be fair, Leicestershire County Cricket Club, the worst cricket club in the top two divisions of the county championship over the last 15 years, people still support Leicestershire County Cricket Club for all the issues. A dream semi-final for me would be clubs outside of the European Super League 12. So you could be from a big league, but as long as it's not the European Super League 12 or PSG, I'm happy. I don't mind German clubs being in there. I don't mind Italian clubs being in there. I don't mind French clubs, Spanish clubs, English clubs, as long as it's not the European Super League. Yeah, I hope Leicester do it. I really do. I want to see Leicester do well. I want to see Leicester do well in Europe. I want to see Leicester win a European trophy, even though it's the Conference League. It's a stepping stone. Um, and again, it's a big fu to the European Super League. I mean, they've won more trophies than Tottenham, but they're not classed as one of the big six, and they're not part of the European Super League because it's down to revenue. I mean, seriously, do one. Um, you know, we could be asking why clubs like Hamburg and Borussia Dortmund and Bayer Leverkusen and some of these other German clubs that have got a great history in Europe and all the European, you know, it's. I know they dropped out, and this is where I think that's a flaw with the European system, where a club can drop out the Champions League into the Europa League, a club can drop out the Europa League into the Conference League, and then it's just well, you're rewarding failure then. Um, right. PSV Eindhoven. To be fair, PSV Eindhoven used to be a great Champions League side back in the day. They've really dropped down the pecking order in Dutch football as well. Um, Rangers got to overturn a deficit against Braga, and West Ham have got a 1-1 against Lyon to fight with. So a lot of British clubs are in Europe tonight, and we can argue whether it's Conference League, Europa League, whatever. This could be a key moment for Leicester going forward. To win that, they automatically qualify for Europa. And then, imagine if Villarreal in the Champions League. That is a big V sign, a big FU to the European Super League clubs. It really is. That these other clubs that were excluded from that special club. Some of them are very wealthy clubs. I mean, PSV Eindhoven have got a brilliant history. West Ham, okay, haven't won a trophy for a very long time, but they're having a very good season. And David Moyes is having a resurgence. Imagine if they win Europa League, for example. We could be having a debate about none of the European Super League clubs actually winning, because this could happen. Villarreal are, in the semi-finals now. We could have that debate about none of the European Super League clubs winning a European trophy this season. How stupid does that make them look now that three of them are still clinging to that hope that they can resurrect the idea? That'd be a brilliant. There'd be an FU to UEFA. It'd be an FU to the European Super League, and that would be more of a benefit for football than if one of the Big 12 win. So I don't want Liverpool or Man City to win the Champions League. I want Villarreal to win the Champions League. I want Leicester to win the Conference League. Even though it's the Conference League, I'm not a big fan of that tournament. The Cup Winners' Cup, which ironically they would be playing if it was the Cup Winners' Cup because they won the FA Cup last season. Listen to the irony of that. The Europa Conference League is based on the long-term replacement, the long-awaited replacement for the Cup Winners' Cup, and Leicester Cup winners last year. So ironically, they're in the right competition historically. And I want West Ham and Rangers to play the Europa League final because it will be the ultimate middle finger to the European Super League clubs and technically to UEFA with the stupid coefficient that they've got. Now, Bodo Glimt, I want them to do well as well. That would be a brilliant final. Leicester versus Bodo. That would be a brilliant final. Brilliant final. I have no doubt that is the Romantics final. But unfortunately, the Conference League shouldn't exist because of the UEFA coefficient. The only reason why it exists is because the UEFA coefficient is weighted towards the bigger clubs and the 5, 6 big leagues. Get rid of that UEFA coefficient, everything's more evenly balanced when it comes to qualification for Europe and the criteria to qualify for Europe. The UEFA coefficient has actually damaged football continent-wide. It is damaged. Smallest country would be something like Malta or someone like that from initial, or Iceland from initial qualification stages. I want to see Glint win the. To a certain extent, but I have a soft spot for Leicester, and I want to see Leicester do well. And I like Brendan Rodgers. I like his style of play that he implements with his teams. I I like the fact that when them winning the Premier League and the FA Cup was an FU to the Big Six. Um, they've actually won more trophies than Tottenham. Leicester have won more trophies than Tottenham historically and in recent times. So they've won multiple. They've won 2 League Cups in the 90s. Tottenham won none. They've won an FA Cup and a Premier League. Tottenham have won none. They've only won 1 League Cup since one trophy since 91 or 1990 or something. Leicester have won 5. Yeah, Leicester's not classed one of the Big Six in England. Tottenham have had 1 trophy in 3 decades. Leicester have had 5. Sorry, that is a perverse reality that Spurs live in. Spurs think they're a big club. Spurs think they're a successful club. Successful at what? Losing finals. Spurs was a small club compared to Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Man United, Chelsea, and Everton, West Ham, or Newcastle. So why was they invited? Because they played a couple of seasons of Champions League. They had a few seasons in the Champions League. They lost the Champions League final. They've lost 2 League Cup finals since they last won it. They've won nothing since 2008. And Leicester, I hope Leicester now gets the final. I really do, because that again is an FU to the Big Six and the Super League 12. I want to see no trophies go to the European Super League clubs. Yes, the League Cup didn't. Was it 2011 when you beat Arsenal? I think it was. The own goal and Zigic was up front. Was it Giroud's own? It was Giroud's own goal. Even then, Everton have won a lot more trophies than Spurs. Admittedly, not in recent times. The last trophy was 95, but Everton have won more trophies than Spurs. And league titles more recently than Spurs. So there is that. There is that. No, I mean, the reason why they really got desperate was they're bankrupt. Basically, if they were standalone entities, well, they would be in administration right now, points deductions and liquidations. But UEFA can't have their big clubs fail. But at the same time, like, they're bringing in these new spending rules over the next 3 seasons, which none of these clubs will be compliant by. In 3-4 seasons' time, they will not be compliant. There is no way they'll be compliant. Could you? I would say so. Maybe Crystal Palace fans might like to argue about that with the size of their fan base, which is actually surprisingly big. There's more Palace fans than Chelsea fans actually in London. In fact, and now Brentford being a Premier League club as well, and Fulham about to come back to the Premier League. It's the Premier League's getting congested with London clubs, and that's interesting. You could argue, yes, if they win some silverware, I think they leapfrog Tottenham. And to a certain extent, Arsenal. I think Arsenal and Spurs, they've got the fan base, but the success has started to dry up. Now, Arsenal won 3 FA Cups in the last few years, so last several years. So Arsenal are still getting trophies every now and then. Spurs haven't had a trophy for 13, 14 years. 14 years since Spurs won a trophy. Yeah, it's 14 years. Yeah, 14 years, just over 14 years. I would say that's a fair reflection on the current state of affairs in London. But bear in mind, you've got a lot of clubs. I think Palace have actually got a bigger fan base than people realise. Now imagine if Palace win the FA Cup this season. It's just, you see the big FUs, the big six, and the European Super League 12. That's what I want to see. Um, yeah, I mean Gareth Southgate. He's going to have some tough decisions in the summer for the European Nations League games, and he's going to have a very tough decision, I think, when it comes to the World Cup selection. Um, I do genuinely believe that. I think there's going to be some real tough squad decisions in the next few months for Southgate and the direction of the England team. And I think Pickford, while he's still picking him, frustrates me. I'm not so sure he's going to be number one come the World Cup. His league form isn't good enough. It's not good enough. I think we're starting to see a change in the guard, changing of the guard in English football in regards to what constitutes a big six. Because, as I said, Leicester have had more trophies in my lifetime than Spurs. Spurs have had two. Leicester have had five. I'm just stating it. If we're not even classing playoff final wins either for silverware, because they get to keep that trophy as well. For the top flight trophies, Leicester have got five. Spurs have two. And I'm being generally fair in that assessment. Blackburn have got the same amount of trophies in my lifetime as Spurs, and they've got a Premier League in there as well. Spurs don't have that. Spurs haven't won the league since 1961. So how Spurs can class themselves as one of the big six? They haven't won anything. They've won what, three trophies in 41 years. Like, how can you justify saying you're a big club when you've only got three pieces of silverware in 4 decades? Maybe four. It's where's the European success? Where's the league success? Where's the domestic success? It's not there. It's in their heads. Oh, we've got a nice shiny stadium. That looks like a toilet bowl. Looks like a bedpan in a hospital. It's not an attractive looking stadium. They haven't got a title sponsor for it still, and they're racked with debt. And I think Tottenham will not be able to meet the expenditure requirements of the debt they've got by 3 or 4 seasons' time under the new UEFA rules. They're not going to meet the criteria in place by the rules. And whether Conte stays there long term or not, I don't know. Some of the comments he's made this season, it's been high and then low. There's a lack of consistency. Yes, they're on the edge of the top four, in that battle for the fourth spot. They're not even close to the top two. Not even close to Chelsea, who are an isolated third in the league. They're not even on the same playing field. Um, it's almost now 60 years of hurt, actually. Yeah, 60 years of hurt. Don't get me wrong, Spurs have had some great players over the years, great international players, top quality players, English and overseas. They've had some great players. The problem is they've had all these great players, can't win any silverware with them. Yet these players go elsewhere and win silverware. And that is the problem. The amount of players they sell on who then go having success at other clubs, be it in England or overseas. Doesn't matter the league they're playing. Remember that. Doesn't matter if it's the Big Five or another league in Europe. They go on and have success elsewhere. And it makes you wonder about the culture within that club. Because, in my opinion, I treat all the leagues equally. Okay? I treat all the leagues equally. And go, oh, why can't you do that? It's the Big Five, the other leagues are crap. Because other leagues are actually entertaining to watch occasionally. There is other football outside of the Big Five leagues. It's amazing. Football played all over the world. Who would have thought? I like that sarcastic humour I have because it's true. When people go to me, this league sucks because it's not Germany, Italian, French. Well, they call the French the Farmers League, one of the Big Five, the coefficient, right? I go, that's not the case because the fans are more passionate by far. There's less money in the game. So the players are getting paid a hell of a lot less to play for those clubs. A hell of a lot less. TV deals are worth less. They're not as well known. Some of these clubs are not as well known over in the US, which is, I think, key why they're not classed as one of the big five leagues. And there's some great talent out in the rest of Europe that goes largely ignored by the Western European media. Largely ignored, and wrongly so. Um, the fans are more vibrant. Some of the kits are amazing as well. Some of the football is actually really, really good. There's some really skilled players in Central Europe. There's some really key, skilled players in the Balkans and Greece and Turkey and Cyprus. There's some great football being played, and it's ignored by the media here in Spain and in Germany to a certain extent. Germany's a bit more open when it comes to looking at Eastern and Central Europe for playing talent. It does scout very well. Italy, the media's got such an obsession with the Champions League, the later stages, the Big 12, hard on for clubs that are right now in carnage and chaos, that don't deserve attention, don't deserve respect. Yeah, I mean, and then Spurs' squad management has been shockingly poor. Has been shockingly poor for decades. They've had some great players um, who play for the club. Klinsmann, for example, ex Spurs. They've had Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa, World Cup '78 Argentina fame. Um, no problem is Levy doesn't want to pay his players what they think they're worth on the going rate, so they go to a club that will pay them. The only player he's given a raise to is Harry Kane and Son. Everyone else is like, nah, I'm not going to give you the raise. And they go, right, here's a transfer request, I want to leave. Um, Unfortunately, Daniel Levy's part of the problem. He's like the Ed Woodward of North London, because while he's a great businessman, he's made his boss a lot of money. He's made a lot of money. He's not a footballer. He's not a footballing brain, and he's made some really cack-handed transfer decisions and cack-handed, recruitment decisions of managers and players and coaching staff. The Conte situation and the Nuno situation this season, and some of the contracts signed are terrible. And I don't know what else to say to that really. Is yeah, the club, while it's got a very wealthy owner who's a tax exile, by the way, which is not a very popular thing to be right now, and Levy is a great business mind. Footballing mind he is not. And I don't know what Tottenham's style is, because the different managers they've had have got all different styles. And I'm not sure what the direction of the club is. And Harry Kane's contract, he does score a lot of goals. And on his day, he's a very good player. I'm going to say that on his day, he's a very good player. However, some of the decisions that have been taken in that boardroom have been shockingly poor. Really shockingly poor. And look at the amount of managers they've had since they last manager over. They've had flashes of, top football, Splashes of top three. I mean, they bollocksed up the 2016 run into the Premier League title. They were neck and neck with Leicester, and they ended up finishing third. 2016 to beginning of 2019, they peaked. That was their window, I believe, and they didn't get it done. And we'll have to see what happens with Conte, but I don't think he's enjoying his time there. I think there's a lot of frustration with Conte, and if next season's trophyless again, it's 15 years without a trophy for a club that claims it's part of the Big Six and part of the European Super League, League 12. 15 years trophyless. That's not good enough. In my opinion, that's not good enough. If you claim you're a big club, in their minds, maybe successful club, they are not. Um, I think the Harry Kane contract is going to be a dead. If we're talking about UEFA bringing in these new expenditure rules in a season or two, that Harry Kane contract is going to become a real problem because other players, you want to attract other players to the club, and sometimes in order to do that, you've got to pay them money. That becomes difficult with Harry Kane's contract extension, with the new spending rules that are coming into force soon. For I think it's 2023 season they're coming. One more season of the current financial fair play. Well, that's interesting. What you class as your top 10? I wouldn't say Arsenal's in the top 10 right now. I think Dortmund have slipped a bit as well. Interesting that PSG aren't on there. But no, I have a fear, not just for Tottenham after Conte, but the debt they've got is troublesome, very troublesome. And that Harry Kane contract and Son's extension as well makes it actually, right now, it makes it easy to attract players for next season. Season after it makes it difficult because the new spending rules come into force and you have to reduce your expenditure rapidly to 70% of income. And that is where a lot of clubs will just not be. It's basically salary cap, basically. It's basically spending cap. They will not be rule compliant within the time frame. It's just not going to happen. Players are going to have to take pay cuts. Um, a lot of players will be leaving on free contracts at the end of seasons rather than being sold in the transfer market because clubs cannot justify the spend. In order to be compliant, they've got to reduce transfer spending. And this is something that I think has been argued for a long time: is a salary cap or a transfer cap in some way, shape, or form to control the expenditure. Um, it's like the January transfer window. 10% of what Man City spent went on agent fees. That's another area that needs to be massively, for me, better, better regulated. That's better. Oh my bad. Um, uh, Talking about trophies won, I mean, I can break down the most trophies won in domestic competitions in Europe. I think we'll find Rangers actually have the most domestic trophies. Um, in fact, Rangers actually have the most trophies of any football club in the world. The titles won in all competitions that they competed in that were classed as actual UEFA competitions. Rangers have actually won the most silverware. But I digress. I digress. So if you're talking about success, Rangers have got the most silverware, but that's on the class as major trophies. A lot of fans don't realise that. Rangers have the most, officially the most league titles and the most major trophies won. People don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. Celtic are, I think, the third most successful club for trophies won historically. Both play in Scotland. Make that one up, could you? Um, and Celtic have a European title as well to their name. Tottenham don't. Just putting that one out there. Rangers are not big on Liverpool. They've got a massive fan base. They're the biggest club in Scotland for fan base. I think 65% of Scottish football fans are Rangers fans. Um, and they're not as good financially, but they have a fair set of silverware in their trophy cabinet in Ibrox. And I'll definitely do a video on the most club honours won. Um, Rangers actually currently have the most trophies. That is generally what is surprising. A lot of fans don't realise that. Yes, obviously Liverpool won six. Is it six? I think it is six. It is six European cups. I think there's a couple of UEFA cups in there as well. Um, if Rangers win the champ, well, if they win the Europa League, I think that again is a nice FU to the UEFA for their coefficient and the European Super League. This is why I want some of those we class as lesser league clubs or lesser clubs in the big leagues to give it to the European elite, because then it really you know buggers up UEFA's coefficient for their planned um, reformatting of the Champions League, and it's a big f off the European Super League clubs because it says there's life outside of those 12. And Man United go about Liverpool about winning the league. I should win. No, it was about 20 odd years. It was the 70s and the 80s. They won nothing apart from FA Cup in 1984. Man United went through a lengthy spell from I think the mid 60s till I think it was apart from 84, 1992. They won like one trophy in like 25 years. They went through, and they were in Division Two at one point. They went a very lengthy spell with very limited success, much like they're going through now. It's just cyclical. Every club will go through a cyclical spell of be it higher league finishes than lower league finishes, or winning trophies, not winning trophies. There's a cyclical spell, and um, that's something that people don't realise. I mean, Leicester played in three out, I think, four seasons they were in League Cup finalist. They had a purple patch in the 90s, then they win the Premier League, then they win the FA Cup. So that's their cyclical spell is 90s and late 2010s to early 2020s. That's their cyclical spell. If they win the Conference League, then that's a continued bit of their current success in the last few years. I use Leicester as an example because it's very easy to see their success, failure, like down at League One at one point, and then success again. Cyclical. Um, yeah, and every club goes through periods of more successful spells and less successful spells. That happens. You can't win every game every season. To be fair, people say we may be without Fergie, however, we Liverpool being without Shankly. Yeah, team success does come and go. Um, um, absolutely, success is not guaranteed. Um, I mean, Chelsea could actually technically have a trophy this season this year if Crystal Palace beat them in the semi-final of the FA Cup. They won't win a trophy this year. That's something that people didn't realise. Is they're only left in one competition, and if Palace beat them, Chelsea have a trophy this season. Then what happens to Thomas Tuchel? We're about to kick off West Ham Rain. Crikey, we could have a lot of British clubs. We could actually have, yeah. I've just realised we could have British clubs in the three European competitions in the semi-finals. That tells you something about the quality of the Premier League right now. Is we could have five British clubs in semi-finals of the European Cup competitions? Five. Four English, one Scottish. Five British clubs, in theory. We've got three so far, we can have five. That is insane. That, out of, I mean, work out, eight, out of the 12, we can have nearly half. In theory, we could have nearly half of the semi-finalists for the three European competitions will be British, nearly. In theory, if West Ham and Rangers can pull it off tonight. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That kind of stat. If it goes where you want it to. Fair point, but Liverpool been on top more and longer than what Man United. Actually, no, Man United were obviously dominated the Premier League era, the first half of it. And most football fans are a lot of younger fans remember the Fergie era and the Wenger era as well, quite vividly. Very vividly, in fact. And you talk to younger fans, they don't know the dark days that Man United went through in the 70s and the 80s. They're not aware of it. They're not aware of the dark days Man City went through. They were in the third tier of English football at one point. And then he ended up in what is now League Two at one point. Oh, yes. Sean Gota saved them from going down to the old Division 3, what is now League Two. And Aston Villa, won the UEFA Cup. No, they've also won the European Cup as well in 1981. So Nottingham Forest won it back to back in 79 80, then Aston Villa won it in 81. People forget that. Unless you're an older Villa fan or you are a hardcore Villa fan who has all the knowledge, people forget about that. I can remember their League Cup win in '96. And I'm not being disingenuous to Villa. Just in the last 25 years, it's not been on the same level as what it was before. They were a very good club in the '80s. Take away Liverpool, there and what they did at Hazel, a lot of clubs, English clubs, missed out on European qualification. Oxford United have got a League Cup winners medal in there. Yeah, Oxford United won the League Cup. And Rangers scored straight off the kickoff, so couldn't make it up, could you? Man United used to get relegated as much as what Chelsea would do at one point. 79, Liverpool and Everton were fighting. Yeah, no, and you had Villa in there. You had Nottingham Forest for a spell, but they were very, very successful. In the 70s and 80s, Villa had a very good side at that time as well. There were some very good teams in the 70s and 80s, other than Liverpool and Everton. There were some very good teams. Liverpool didn't have it all their own way. There were periods where they weren't winning everything, but they were the most consistent side over a 25-year period. And Everton, I think, won a league title in there and a UEFA Cup or Cup. I can't remember if it was the Cup Winners' Cup or UEFA Cup, but they won a European trophy. It really was Liverpool's generation, Liverpool's era, but other clubs won trophies as well. And three of the European Cups didn't go to Liverpool. Two went to Nottingham Forest and one went to Aston Villa. So Liverpool didn't have it all their own way in Europe. And that's something that you've got to bear in mind. I think Oxford United won a League Cup. I'm trying to think of some other clubs that won trophies. I've got to remember the trophy. I think you had the. I'm trying to think. There were other clubs that won trophies. It's really going to bug me now. I've got to go back and look at this. I mean, Forest won. I think the only trophy Brian Clough and Forest didn't win was the FA Cup. They won the league, they won the League Cup, and they won the European Cup. back to back, which is very hard to do. Remember that, very very hard to do when well, was now the Champions League back to back, but they did it back to back. So yeah, it was a very good sign until Hazel, and then we were banned from Europe, and the effects that that had meant that some very good English sides couldn't compete in the Cup Winners' Cup, the UEFA Cup, and the European Cup. Now the Champions League, now the Europa League, and missed out on the opportunity to play in Europe and to compete in Europe for five years. Liverpool had a 6-year battle, and we others had 5. Oh, Frankfurt beating Barcelona 1-0, yes. Football gods are on our side tonight, and Rangers winning 2-0 on the night. The football gods are on our side tonight. We want this. You can believe. I only say that because I don't want any of the European Super League clubs or the Big Six to win any European trophies this season, simply because of their attitude, their greed, and their arrogance. It's like, look, it's a privilege, not a right, to be in their position as professional athletes and as well paid as they are. And they forget that. They're just, a lot of them aren't particularly nice individuals. Do I prefer Celtic or Rangers? Neither, but I have a lot of subscribers who support both. As in, I've got subscribers who are Celtic fans, and I've got subscribers who are Rangers fans. And then Roma are winning 1-0, so you just couldn't make this up, could you? With Mourinho as manager, with English players in the Roma squad, you just couldn't make this up. Man United from the 90s to 2010s was better than Liverpool, but Liverpool were better in the 70s, 80s, and from 2013 up to present. Yes, you could argue that. That is a fair assessment. I wouldn't argue from 2013. I would say a little bit later, 2017, 2018. They were the better side, not necessarily from 2013 onwards. It's disingenuous to Ferguson and the success he had at the club. But it was starting to dry up by the end, and it's noticeable. It is noticeable. But it's handball. Oh, of course, VAR has to ruin things. But it's still a great start by Rangers. I think they're on top now, aren't they? So, and they're playing. They know they want to. And Van Bronckhorst wants to win a major European trophy. So fair play to them. It is the side that Gerrard built. Remember that as well. The side that Gerrard built. And while things have been a bit tougher at Villa, A, it's a tougher league, and B, the club, I think, look how he's improved from where the club were when he took over to where they are now. There you go. He's made Villa a harder team to play against, better team in how they play. Yes, but Leicester won the Premier League that season in 15-16. So I think, and so I'm just going to drop that hint there. And they were in a title race, but didn't win. Didn't win. So while they've had better points totals and average league finishes since 2013, they haven't won as many trophies as people think. So I remember that. While they've had better league finishes than United in that spell, they haven't won as many trophies as City or Chelsea. And in that period, Arsenal won 3 FA Cups as well. So another trophy that Liverpool have not dominated, neither have Man City, to be fair. They haven't. Both those clubs have not had the success they should have had in that competition. So again, a Guardiola Klopp semi-final in the FA Cup, and then you've got Patrick Vieira, the underdog in all this, uh, against Chelsea and Tuchel. And I think Palace could be the team that actually wins the FA Cup this year, which would be hilarious if they do. Um, and Patrick Vieira, the job he's doing at Palace, very underrated. I imagine Crystal Palace playing in Europe next season. That'd be ridiculous, but fully deserved. And the players they're developing, and Wilfried Zaha's improvement, and other players around him raising their game and improving. It's refreshing to see what's happening at Palace. It's refreshing to see the joy at Sellers Park, and I think they're long overdue for us. I think they won the League Cup in the 70s, Palace, or 60s. So Palace, I think they won the League Cup, but it's been a long time without success. So to see Palace lift the League Cup would be nice. The FA Cup would be nice to see Palace have some success. Following on from Leicester last year, it'd be nice just to see that silverware go to Sellers Park. I think it's important for the competitiveness of the Premier League, that teams can win trophies outside of the Big Six. Even though Arsenal and Spurs, how they class as Big Six these days, I have no idea because they can't win anything. Apart from they can catch a cold. FA Arsenal. I mean, it's Wenger's trophy, isn't it? Really. It, the guy was an FA Cup genius. It's Wenger's trophy. There's no other way to describe the FA Cup. It's Wenger's trophy. He should have been allowed to keep it himself. And that's my personal opinion. They should have given him a special award. Because I don't think any manager wins as many FA Cups as Arsene Wenger. I really don't. I think that era of a dominant manager staying at a club for a decade plus, 2 decades, Ferguson's case, nearly 3 decades, I think it's long gone. I honestly believe that. I'm a bit surprised Arsenal were not far in the FA Cup last season and this season they went out early. Yeah, admittedly, I agree with that. But they won one more FA Cup with Wenger at the end. They've won 3 FA Cups since they've been at the Emirates. That's the only silverware they've won since the move from Highbury. And each of the last 3 managers, so Wenger, Emery, and now Arteta, have won the FA Cup. Couldn't make that one up. A different manager winning the same trophy. A couple of seasons apart. I think next season they might win it. Looking at how it's going, I'm a little bit surprised with how they played. The FA Cup this season they were really poor, easily outplayed. I think even against Forest they were terrible, really poor. Second best to every loose ball, pulling out tackles, not really wanting to get stuck in. They did deserve to get knocked out. They were terrible on the night. In my opinion, they were really poor on the night. Chelsea won the Super Cup and Club World Cup, and then Tuchel wins the FA Cup. So, yeah, but the 2 trophies won, I wouldn't class as important trophies to win. You want to win the Champions League. You want to win the league. You want to win the FA Cup. They're the big trophies that compete in Europe and domestically. And with everything that's happened off the field this season in the last little while, and with the preferred bids now on the table, 3 American, 1 British, and I'm only sold on one of the American bids, by the way. I think it'll be interesting to see what the new owners do. Generally, when there's a takeover, the incumbent, the manager's already incumbent, generally 70% of the time there's a change of manager. Now, we'll have to see what happens. But whatever deal takeover takes place, they've got 6 weeks to finalise it before their operating licence expires, and that means administration. So it'll be interesting to see who they what happens to Tuchel, whether the new owners want a change of manager or whether they stick with him at least for the beginning of next season. But the Abramovich era was known for, even if you won trophies, you lost the job. And Chelsea, I think, have to stop with this constant managerial merry-go-round because I don't think he's actually benefiting the team. As time has worn on, it's benefiting the team less and less. Um, um, and yeah, he won the Champions League last season, but that was the team that Lampard built. But Lampard gets sacked. Who knew? And it's a weird one with Chelsea because since Abramovich took over the club, the longest the manager's lasted is 3 seasons. Nothing more than that. And that lack of stability, in the dugout is a problem because every manager that's come in has had a different style and a different way of playing, different tactics, and that can be a bit troublesome for a young player's development. Because why we've seen some of the players actually struggle to find a place in the Chelsea setup and find a place in the style of play. Like Werner, his confidence is shot because he's had so many. He's had, I think, 3 managers now telling him how they want him to play, and it's affecting his confidence and he's got ability. His confidence is gone. The Lukaku situation, will he still be a Chelsea player next season? I don't think so. He's made it sort of dropped a hint that he wants to leave, go back to Italy. Thoughts on Ryan Reynolds and Wrexham and the way he's owning it? He's not the first Hollywood actor to buy a professional sports team. Um, he's actively engaging with the community and the fan base. Um, I like what he's doing. I think he has a vision of getting Wrexham back in the Football League. I think he has actually thoroughly looked at the history of our national sport and the promotion relegation system. And he's Canadian as well. He's not American. He's actually Canadian, rather, which is important. And he plays Deadpool. He generally is a funny guy. I think he's generally. I don't think this is just on a whim. This is serious because he's generally serious about his commitment to the club. Russell Crowe obviously owns the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Paul Newman famously owned a NASCAR race team. Of course, the late Paul Newman from Rich Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with what's his name, Robert Redford as his co-star. He famously had his own motor racing team and had a passion for motorsport. So yeah, no, this is not the first Hollywood actor to purchase a sports team and be actively, um, you know, actively involved in sport and passionate about what they're doing. But no, I like it's refreshing. It's different. It's different, and his first game as owner was against Maidenhead United, and they lost. And he was actually at Maidenhead United, down the road from where I live, watching the game. So he does go to as many games as possible. I think he's taken a bit of a break. He's a very hands-on owner in the sense that he regularly attends games, which a lot of owners of football clubs don't do and have no involvement. Um, you know, Russell Crowe is an avid rugby league fan anyway. What better way to show how you love football by basically buying your boyhood club? So no, he's not the first celebrity to buy a sports team. He won't be the last. Um, but I don't mind it. I don't mind it. Who's going to pay Lukaku's wages? Never mind losing on the fee as well. It just hasn't worked at Chelsea. It didn't. Lukaku has had some good spells at clubs and then some bad spells at clubs. And I think his time at United, his time at Chelsea, it just hasn't worked. At Everton, he was brilliant. At United, it didn't work. At Chelsea, it hasn't worked. And maybe the Italian style of play where you have that physical battle with the centre back, he likes that kind of play. The players around him as well, the tactics being employed. There are multiple reasons. Um, but it's just not worked. Now he's not a bad player. I don't think Lukaku's a bad player. I just think the style of football that Chelsea are employing and that Man United is a toxic club. Let's remind ourselves of the situation at Man United. I'm just going to sit up straight for a little bit. I need to keep moving, otherwise my back gets stiff. It's the style, it's the formation, it's the style of play. He needs a strike partner or maybe two wingers in a forward three to go past him, so he can drop a little bit, hold the ball up, and he's got runners going on behind. He's like Peter Crouch and Jermaine Defoe at Tottenham at their peak. Go ahead, describe it, little and large. Um, he it's like Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler at Liverpool. Uh, he needs he needs that nippy forward who's got more pace and manoeuvrability and guile about them. While he's the bigger centre forward who holds up. Emil Heskey. He's like Emil Heskey. Emil Heskey had Robbie Fowler and Michael Owen as strike partners on rotate because Owen and Fowler had their own injury problems. When they were both fit, very hard to leave them both out the side. So Emil Heskey was a physical centre forward and not necessarily the most skillful, but he had Michael Owen and Robbie Fowler to link up play with and bring them into the play. He had so that's how I see Lukaku. He's very similar to Emil Heskey with a little bit more skill, but his attitude is also a concern. Um, uh, it didn't work, but a lot of players are struggling. You've gone to United, and their confidence has been shattered, and they're struggling to find form. A lot of players have had a dip in form going to Man United, and that's to do with the culture of the club. That's to do with what's going on behind the scenes in the dressing room, in the structures of the club. United is a toxic culture right now. Um, he did, and you know why? Different cultures at the club, more positive dressing room. There seemed to be a direction with those clubs at the time when he was playing that wanted to take. There was a positive direction at those clubs with the style of football they were playing, the energy levels that were being employed, the commitment from players to fight and scrap for every 50-50 ball. Whereas at Man United, there's a clear disillusionment and massive culture issue in that dressing room and at the club. There's no hiding from that fact. No hiding at all. And yeah, for whatever reason, it works at those clubs. It hasn't worked at Chelsea. It didn't work at United. It's the same league. He's playing against the same players in the same kind of physical league. Style of players. Thoughts on NBC American soccer personalities such as the two Robbies and Rebecca Lowe? Are they new other things to you as well? I don't really follow the NBC. I've got the NBC YouTube page because they all show clips. And Tim Howard discussing um, the Everton situation in regards to what's happened to Everton and the direction Everton's taking. I like Tim Howard because he's spent a long time over here playing in England with Man United and Everton. He was a world class goalkeeper. I haven't really spent a lot of time obviously I call them football pundits. You call them soccer personalities. That's a cultural thing. Quite personally, I don't really, if I'm being brutally honest, spend too much time really focusing or worrying about. Um, what is interesting is right now in the time of year, the NHL playoffs are going to start in May. Um, I don't think the Jets are going to make the playoffs, so I've sort of tuned out a little bit because the form of the Jets went. We had a bad spell, and if we're not playoff bound, I sort of tune out a little bit. I'll keep in touch with the scores and how we're doing, but I haven't watched any NHL games for a couple of months. The NRL started, and rugby league is the sport that I watch in the summer, and I'm now NRL orientated until October. Um, quite frankly, uh, I think NBC. I mean, American broadcasting in regards to European football has come a long way. I will agree with that. Um, they've employed some very good insect cough. They have employed some very knowledgeable ex players and commentators in regards to um, the game. Uh, I think the American fan base's knowledge on the history of clubs, not just the Big Six in England or the Big 12 in Europe, but the knowledge of the leagues and the clubs is massively improved. Um, their knowledge on the history that goes back before 1992. Um, the thirst for more interest in our promotion relegation structures and the clubs in the lower divisions that may have played in the old first division of the Premier League. The amount of investment, not in just in the Premier League, but even in Scottish football, with I think one of the Dundee clubs is American owned now. There's American money in the Championship, um, League One and League Two. Um, the, the the interest from potential owners to new fans, I think is good. Red All Stars has players from Liverpool, Man United, Bayern, Arsenal, AC Milan. Blue All Stars from Chelsea, Man City, Milan, PSG, and Barcelona. Um, that's a good one. That's a good one. I like that. Who wins? I reckon that could be a draw. Actually, I reckon that could be a draw. Um, because the issue is when you have an All Stars game, you've got to try and find a balanced formation that actually suits five or six, seven, maybe eight different styles of play. Um, so with how some of the results this season these clubs have had to deal with, and some of the losses these clubs have had, they haven't had that would be a very balanced game. I think it'd be very hard to pick a formation for either side, and I think it's a bit flawed to say, you know, only these sides can be selected for the All Stars. I think an All Stars squad should be selected from a much broader selection pool because there's some really good players playing outside of those clubs for other teams who I think rightly deserve a look in. And there's some players playing on those teams right now that are just having just a shocking and aren't up to scratch. But in regards to the NBC American soccer personalities, I think the production quality has definitely gone up. I think they still, some of the lingo is not of European football fans' taste. It is aimed at the American fans, so they'll call it soccer, we call it football. You call them personalities, we call them pundits. Um, the the discussions, and they do get journalists as guests to discuss goings on in European football. I'm quite happy with how they've developed the interest in the fan base, and the growth of the game. Look at the MLS; it's growing. So it's obviously the interest in the sport as a whole is having a positive impact. Um, and the growth that the MLS has had in recent years is fantastic. And actually, it's quite an enjoyable watch as a neutral. Just casually watching it, I find it quite enjoyable. The atmospheres in the stadiums could be better. It's a bit robotic from the fans, um, and of course, our sporting cultures are different. So you wouldn't get away with some of the chanting we have in European football in the US. It just wouldn't happen. Um, the sporting cultures are different in what is acceptable in public. I think the Americans are very conservative about public verbal uh, verbals as we call it and stuff like that. Um, so you could, I mean, the American fans could work a little bit more on the atmosphere and keeping the energy atmosphere levels a high energy level and being a bit creative with some of their chants and but at the same time, the league is growing, the sport's growing. Some of the stadiums are fantastic facilities. They are beautiful little stadiums. Some of the bigger stadiums are quite nice as well. The energy and the effort that has gone into um, growing uh, the league and expanding the league and stabilizing the league. There was a period where the MLS had a very uncertain future before David Beckham goes. I think David Beckham going to LA Galaxy saved the MLS. Do you think smartphones have taken away some of the passion, noise, and atmosphere? Yes, yes. There's a lot of people who are more interested in. Where's my phone? Actually, people are too busy looking at these. Far too busy, doing their latest Instagram post or their latest Snapchat or Facebook. Yeah, I mean, I've been to sports ice hockey matches here and things where the kid in front is on an iPad. Why bring a kid to a sports event as a season ticket holder with your other kid, and that kid is playing on an iPad loudly, not even with headphones on, loudly throughout the entire game? It's very distracting. It's fucking annoying. It really is annoying. Um, you're there to watch the game. Um, but I think it does take something away. It does. I've noticed it. I mean, I haven't been to a sporting event since 2019, so I obviously COVID and moving to where I live now. It's money's a bit tight, so I'm gonna be honest. I haven't been to a sporting event for 2.5 years. In saying that, the last time I went, yeah, the kid in front of me had an iPad in front of him. Really annoying. Really annoying because it wasn't even quiet. It was very loud. So if there was a break in play for an injury or a player going to the penalty box and the referee's discussing with captains and not a lot going on, it was very, very annoying. Top six next season: Liverpool, City, Arsenal, United, Chelsea, Spurs. I don't think so. I don't think Man United. We'll have to see if Ten Hag, what happens with the squad, what happens with signings. I'm not sold on Arsenal being up there. I'm not sold on Spurs being up there. I think West Ham could be in that mix. I think Wolves could be in that mix. I think Leicester could have a bounce back season. Crystal Palace and Vieira, if they continue their progression as a team, as a group, um, I think it's going to be a little bit more harder to predict than that. But hey, that's your prediction. It's subjective. I'm not disagreeing with it necessarily. I just think it might be not what you expect. I still think City and Liverpool will be the top two. But we'll have to see if Chelsea have a change of manager with new ownership. Man United, if Ten Hag is going to be their new appointment, what changes will he make to that squad? Um, yeah, I'm not. I don't know what's going on with the Chelsea future. They've got 6 weeks to, get the club sold and a new operating license. They might have to sell a lot of players. They might have to sell a lot of players. So we'll see what happens with Chelsea in the next 6 weeks. Look, look, Chelsea as a fan base, they've had a period of success. If you can't get rid of Ronaldo, I don't see how he can make immediate change. Neither Maguire as well. And Pogba wants a salary increase to 500k a week. If United want to be, if you wait when you wait for finalise their new spending rules, which is basically a salary and transfer cap in all but name, in a manner of speaking, it's a soft cap basically. United will struggle to get compliant. United will struggle to get spending rule compliant under the new rules that have been brought in within the time frame. It's honest fact. So a lot of clubs will actually struggle to be compliant financially with their wage bills. Uh, so yeah, I think re-signing Ronaldo, it's like Gareth Bale going back to Tottenham for his loan spell. Re-signing Ronaldo was a massive mistake. And Frankfurt beating Barcelona is brilliant. Good luck to Eintracht Frankfurt, an underrated club in German football. Really underrated German club. Hope they do well. And of course, when Eintracht Frankfurt beat Bayern Munich 3-1 in the German Cup final a few years back, it's one of the most popular videos on the channel. So yeah, I hope Barca lose because again, it's a big fu to the European Super League clubs. And it shows how far Barcelona have actually fallen down the pecking order when it comes to football right now and success outside of domestic football. I want Villarreal to win the Champions League. I want Leicester to win the Conference League, and I actually want to see Rangers West Ham in the final. I really do. I do want to see West Ham actually win the Europa League because again, it's a big fu to the Big Six and it's a big fu to the European Super League. Um, and they've been as West Ham fans. I mean, they're such a passionate. I've got a lot of mates who are West Ham fans, and a good friend of mine has just undergone an operation. He's had to have his leg amputated by the knee because he had a rare form of nerve cancer, and he's a lifelong West Ham fan. And I just want West Ham to do well, just to cheer him up. He's football mad. He collects football jerseys of an ugly nature. He will collect jerseys from all over the world. And I've got a lot of friends who are Hammers, a lot of friends who are West Ham fans, and I want to see West Ham do well. The fan base deserves a trophy for their loyalty since Trevor Brookings' goal in that FA Cup final all those years ago. And yeah, I want to see West Ham do well. It's refreshing to see a new club compete for trophies. It's refreshing to see a new club compete for the European places. That a few seasons ago when Slaven Bilic was in charge, we're looking like getting relegated. So West Ham's turnaround under David Moyes is good to see. It's good to see for David Moyes as well. I feel sorry for David Moyes from his United and Real Sociedad and Sunderland spells. They didn't go very well. There were people saying he's done as a manager, how his managerial fortunes have turned for the good. And he doesn't have a great record in Europe with Everton either. He was didn't have the best record in Europe as Everton manager either. So it's refreshing to see David Moyes have a resurgence in his in his managerial career. I found David Moyes a brutally straight, honest talking guy. I like that. He's got a bit of attitude about him. He's got a bit of personality about him, and I want to see West Ham do well. And the Villarreal story on Unai Emery just shows how badly Arsenal treated him. First trophy, he brought them the first trophy since Wenger left the club, and got them to a European final the season after. And yeah, when the wheels did come off a little bit, but look what he's doing at Villarreal. Players want to play for him. So, and he's working on a far smaller budget than the Premier League, and he won the Europa League last season with them. So he's a proven manager. Did it with Sevilla. He's doing it with Villarreal. I wish him all the best. Um, and less from the Brendan Rodgers. I like their style of play. I like what he's done now. I like, you know, the legacy he's carried on from Ranieri. And it's a positive club. It's a club where the fans, feel a good connection, and I don't feel that with some of the other clubs. In the World Cup, England, Spain, France, Germany. I don't think Spain are going to do very well in this World Cup. I don't think Germany are either. France and England, I'm not sold on either of those four making the semi-finals. If I'm being brutally honest, I don't see those four nations making the semi-finals in the World Cup. I just don't. And that's would I like to see that? No, I would like to see the four best teams in the World Cup make. Well, they've got to be entertaining and they've got to be free flowing and open. And with how the Euros went and the style of football played, Germany and France were terrible. Spain weren't much better; they were poor. And England, okay, yes, they get to the final, but their game management isn't good enough. And with the condensed off season that we're going to have, and the disrupted league seasons we're going to have, I don't see those four nations making the semi-finals. I think it'd be South American sides to do it, or an underdog side from one of the other European nations doing quite well. I don't see that as the semi-final lineup. Holland are back. Are they favourites? Well, look, Louis van Gaal has obviously now come very publicly announced he is battling cancer and he's quite serious. So the players want to play from. The players will be motivated by that. They will up their game with Van Gaal. I believe that. I think that's going to bring the squad closer together. And the Dutch have some good players. They misfired, obviously, in the Euros. They were poor in the Euros. I think Van Gaal. I think, obviously, his unfortunate cancer diagnosis and his health. I honestly think as long as he's well enough to, get to the World Cup, I think the Dutch may put a spanner in the works. USA will finish top. England will be second like 2018. I'm not sold on the US because they missed the World Cup last time, 4 years ago, and and I think a lot hinges on how they play against Iran, and a lot hinges about what the fourth nation to make it out of the playoffs. So Scotland, Wales, and Ukraine. A lot hinges on you know who finishes off that group. Um, but the Americans will be frustrated that they missed out 4 years ago. They've got some good young players, and with the MLS, growing and becoming more popular and the quality improving, um, I can see the US being really, really, really difficult to read in regards to scouting and looking at how they play. But the Canadians were better than them in the qualifying, and Mexico gave them a good run as well. So, and Mexico out the top three in CONCACAF are the only ones that were at the last World Cup. So again, with the Canadians and the Mexicans and the US, the only if we're looking at the World Cup and progression, other nations will know a lot about Mexico, US to a certain extent, but not a lot about Canada. Canada could have a real dark horse tournament where they could actually surprise some people and go far. I think really mix it up. Um, but it's look, we're what 8 months out from the World Cup. A lot can happen between now and the World Cup. Players can get injured, players can get suspended, illness, loss of form. A lot of things can happen between now and December. A lot can happen. So, um, well, no, late November, a lot can happen between now and the World Cup. It's if England finish first, England will most likely play Senegal, African champions, in the quarterfinals. If England beat Senegal, beat France, if England top of it. Again, that's a lot of assumptions that Senegal and France are going to have good tournaments. You're assuming that if we're going by squads that are available, that they're all going to play really well. We're assuming a lot. I'm not a massive fan of doing fraction predictions and all that. Predicting the draw. Um, you've got to beat what's in front of you first. Um, and while if the World Cup was to take place in the summer, um, then squads are more certain. It's not. There's a lot of football to be played between now and the World Cup, and that makes it very hard to predict who's going to be in squads, how teams are going to perform, if players get injured before in the first half of the European seasons. Players will get injured, players will get suspended, players will have illness, players will lose form. It's very, very difficult to predict who's going to be going on the plane to Qatar and who's not. In all the nations that have qualified, plus the nations that have still got to qualify. Um, so, in that regard, keep your powder close to your chest, keep your powder dry. We can start looking when the squads are all announced before the tournament. That's when you can look at, okay, on paper is one thing, it's put it together on the pitch. France and the Euros were terrible. Spain were terrible. Scotland, if they qualified, were terrible. Ukraine were decent, but obviously, emotionally, a lot's going on with Ukraine. There's a lot of emotion behind their qualification campaign and they're going into this playoff. A lot of emotion in that. And that's going to, mental toll. Finland finished second. I don't think Holland are better than Senegal. And in the quarterfinal, England play against Argentina, which is not as good as France. I think. Again, there's a lot of predictions that all these teams are going to get out of the group. All these teams are going to play really well. This is again the danger of predicting these things. You just can't. Look at Brazil in 2014. England were terrible. Italy were terrible. Let's not kid ourselves. Euro 2016, England weren't great. Euro 2012, England weren't great. So there's a lot of assumptions and hope. I don't like trying to. This is the pressure that the players don't need. I think Japan could be dangerous. They are very good technically. They play with a lot of pace on the ball. They've got some good runners who will make good darting runs. And the Japanese league is not a bad league, to be fair. And a lot of the best players do play in Europe. And they're very fit, very well organised, very disciplined. Vulnerable, I think, in the air because they are, on average, a slightly shorter side in height. The goalkeeping position could be their weakness. They could be weak from crosses. On saying that, technically, they're good passers. They have good movement. They play the ball with pace. So they're not afraid to run at defenders, they're not afraid to make the runs and pass and move quickly. And they're entertaining to watch. If Italy was at the World Cup, I think Italy would have won it, but I think Spain, no, I can't see that. Not with how they played in the Euros. And same with Germany. Qualification is one thing, tournament football is completely different. And Germany and Spain proved that with how poor they were. Rangers 2-0, West Ham 2-0. Good, positive scorelines there. And Frankfurt beating Barcelona as well. You just love to see that. And Eintracht Frankfurt are an underrated German side. They really are. They've got a great history. I've done a video on Eintracht Frankfurt actually. The history of the club. Uh, Really underrated side. I just want to, obviously, with all the controversy and the negativity and the negative headlines surrounding Qatar getting the World Cup and the issues with building the stadiums and the political crap, it, we can't change it. The World Cup's happening. I think the fact it's being played when it is those leagues that are summer leagues or those leagues in the southern hemisphere, so it will be their winter. No, it will be their summer. Sorry, so the southern hemisphere leagues will actually have an advantage. So the South American um, um, South American leagues. This is where I think a South American team will do quite well, or South American teams will do quite well. South American teams struggle in European um, World Cups, generally speaking, um, in the sense of winning them. But when it comes to World Cups not on European soil, different. So I think we could see some South American um, teams do well. The NRL is being a bit lopsided. Sharks, Storm, Panthers. Well, that's only three teams. It's early in the season. Parramatta have had a good start to the season as well. Um, I think the top four are going to be those four clubs. Uh, I can't see Penrith doing the whole season unbeaten. The Storm have shown a few little wobbles and cracks. They're not looking as invincible. The loss to Parramatta is a massive blow to them, and they've got to play Penrith. Yeah, and that's going to be a real battle. That one. The Sharks have had a great start, but they've well played the Storm this weekend. Big match for Nico Hines and Dale Finucane. Big match for them. Nico Hines playing not in the fullback role, but in the halves on a full-time basis. That's going to be interesting to see how he does against Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes. And Dale Finucane, I think he's the heart and soul leader that the Storm have lost. I think he was the true leader of that club, and a good vice captain behind Cameron Smith. And I think the Storm are missing him badly. That's going to be a good game down at Amy Park. I think Parramatta are the other side in the top four, and then there's a gap in the rest. And I think from fifth to about 12th, maybe 13th, 14th is highly congested. And then you've got the Bulldogs, the Dragons, Bulldogs, and then there's a gap to the Tigers. I think the Bulldogs will not get the wooden spoon. Quite frankly, I think there are sides worse than them right now with how they're playing. Even though they're not winning games, they're committed. The fight's there, the passion's there. Flanagan's back in the 7 jersey, which I think is crucial. I think he's the long-term partner to Burton in the halves. But I think Trent Barrett is not going to be there next season. I think a different coach will come in to coach the Bulldogs and take them forward. Michael Maguire, he's done the Tigers. Done at the Tigers. I can't see them winning at the weekend. I know Jackson Hastings has gone to 7 and Brooks to 6. But Michael Maguire, look, he's a Premiership winning coach. He's won titles in the NRL and the Super League, so he's not a bad coach. Okay, he's not. He's a class operator. He's won in 2 leagues. He's gone like I've won in the NRL. I've got to challenge myself in a different league where it's a different style of football. It's a different footy. It's a different style of rugby league. It's a different physicality, different pace. It's not as structured. It's a different style of physicality. You've got running halves a lot more unstructured half-back play, and from 7 and 6. It's a different style of rugby league played, and he's one over there as well. So what's happened at the Tigers is just it's the toxic culture of the club. You've got to understand where the West Tigers are now in 2022. You have to go back to 2000 and the merger between the Western Suburb Magpies and the Balmain Tigers, 2 bankrupt clubs. Except Western Suburbs have been on financial life support for the best part of 17, 18 years. They were basically broke throughout the 80s and the 90s and had the 2 worst NRL seasons up to, I'm going to say, the Newcastle Knights' second wooden spoon they got a couple of years back. And when Dane Gagai left and uh, went to the Bunnies, the Western Suburb Magpies, their defence was shocking, especially in the last season. They conceded over 1,000 points conceded. I'm not joking. I did a video on the Western Suburb Magpies in '98 and '99. Please look away. You are a Wests fan of old, or if you have relatives who followed the Magpies. '98 and '99 were brutal, brutal. The stats are brutal. The issues with the West Tigers go back to 2000, when the Tigers and the Magpies merged together for the dual venture club. And they had that purple patch with Benji Marshall, and they win the grand final in 2005. And there's a good few seasons around there, a couple of good seasons. It's been 10 years. 10 years. No, 11 years, I think, with no finals appearances. But in that period, they've never got the wooden spoon. This is the worst start for the club since 2000. So as a dual venture club. What is their identity? Do they go back to Leichhardt or Campbelltown? What is their identity? Could the Tigers be? Well, you're relocating failure from one location to another. That's the problem. You're just transplanting a mess of culture and poor dressing room culture, poor club culture, and and a merger of two dysfunctional clubs, financially at least. Where do you put them? And would a new location support failure? I highly doubt that. The fan base, they've got a big fan base. The fan base is loyal. The issue is, what is the culture of the club? What is the club? Either they go back to being Balmain or Wests and have the other club as the reserve grade, New South Wales Cup side, and they permanently relocate to either Campbelltown or Leichhardt and invest in redeveloping one of those stadiums and make that their permanent home. And then the reserve grade side, or the New South Wales Cup side, sorry, should play out the other. And that's how it should be. Split the dual venture up, in a sense, and either go back to Balmain or Wests. That is your side, Western Suburbs, so the Magpies or the Tigers. And the other club becomes the New South Wales Cup side that feeds and develops players for the NRL side. And split the dual venture up a little bit, because do what North Sydney Bears and the Manly Sea Eagles did it. They did a dual venture for a couple of seasons. It didn't work. It did not work. And the Bears went, we're leaving this dual venture, and now they're playing in New South Wales Cup. And now they're a feeder side for the Roosters. In my opinion, that's what should happen. Now, relocating it, great, Adelaide or Perth, that's brilliant. But you're just transplanting a dysfunctional club to a location where, guess what, Adelaide and Perth, guess what, they failed as well. At the time the West Tigers are born, Adelaide and Perth are dying. Now, while I agree that Adelaide or Perth should be the 18th team, in my opinion, you could relocate West Tigers and then make the 18th team in the other location. It's fine. You could put them in Perth or Adelaide. It's fine. But then you're just transplanting a poor squad, quality squad. It's a low grade. It's not. It's mostly reserve grade players, and a lot of players are leaving at the end of the season anyway. You're just taking failure from one location and you're putting it in a location where it's not guaranteed to improve the situation. And while fans in Adelaide or Perth would happily support the team, a team, because look at State of Origin, fans watch State of Origin. When games, COVID notwithstanding, previous seasons when games have been taken on the road, fans turn up. So there is no doubt there are rugby league fans in Perth and Adelaide. No doubt. But in my opinion, the West Tigers, it's just a mess. The board is not accountable enough. Michael Maguire is he doesn't see out the season. The gap between them and the Bulldogs and even the Dragons is huge. The Dragons would beat them. The Bulldogs would beat them. I think the Bulldogs probably beat the Dragons as well, to be fair. And that's being brutally honest. I think the Bulldogs are not the worst side in the NRL. I think there are sides worse than them. Oh, look, my team, the Canberra Raiders, we blew a 12-point lead and lost 18-12 today to North Queensland. A side that hasn't made finals since, what, is it 2017 or 2018? We lost to North Queensland. Badly. Just fell apart in the second half. Not good enough. But they are still far superior. They would batter the West Tigers 40-50 as things are going. Because there's just no. There's no energy in their play. The players have tuned out completely. Ken Marlowe and Tyrone Peach have been dropped as secondary captains on the leadership group. Gildar, who's signed from the Super League, has been dropped. Brooks has been moved from 6 to 7, or 7 to 6, sorry. And Jackson Hastings has been moved in back. He's been unfit for a little bit, but he's back in the starting lineup. Is it Madden? Is it Madden? Yeah, it's Madden, I think. John Madden. I think he should go in over Brooks, but Brooks is paid so much money. Plus, next season he gets an extension plus a raise. Be paid over $1 million next year. I think $1.2 million. It's 10% of your salary cap on a player who just. I think he's in his career. He's the halfback with the longest lack of the most games played without having a finals appearance. The most seasons played without playing finals football. Um, yeah, James Tedesco, Mitchell Moses, Kevin Nguama, Ryan Pappenhausen. You know they're going to lose. What's his name? Leilua. He's going at the end of the season. Um, it's not only is it poor roster management. They had an opportunity to sign Harry Grant off loan on a permanent contract, and they didn't. So they've got weakness in the hooking role at 9. Luke Brooks has never played finals football, so they brought in players out of desperation. I mean, naming 5 captains at the start of the season, that strikes of Michael Maguire's run out of idea. Michael Maguire looks like a broken man. Every time they do a focus video on a shot of the box, he looks like he's about to cry. Madge is a damn good coach. But, Ivan Cleary's a damn good coach. Same result. He's won a grand. He's coached now in 3. Ivan Cleary's coached in 3 grand finals. Yeah, he's won 1. But before and after being at the Tigers, he's coached the grand final. Maguire has won, I think, 3 titles as a coach. 1 in Australia, 2 in the Super League. He is not a bad coach. So if it's not the coach, what is it? Because the squad itself, the roster itself, over the years has been turned over. It's not the same core group of players every season. They brought new faces in. Other players have left. And for me, the buck stops at the top. Culture starts from the top. A positive culture starts from the top down. So there's your problem. It's the board, it's the CEO, it's the club president, whatever, director. It starts at the top. Tim Sheen's been brought back into the club, but doesn't have much power. If they sack Maguire, does Sheen's do an interim coaching role until they can find a permanent replacement for next season? That's the honest question. So I'll leave that there. As for F1 going to Vegas, F1 cancelling France, and other historical tracks, could the F1 break? For me, I understand why they've gone to Vegas, and Vegas as a logistical location makes sense. It's got the hotel space, it's got the logistics. It wants to diversify its sporting portfolio. It wants to, be taken seriously as a sports city. It's got the Vegas Golden Knights, and now the Raiders have moved from Oakland. It's got the NASCAR facility. The problem is it's a street circuit, and I'm not sold on the new aero package on these F1 cars and the changes with the regulations package with street circuits. But we'll wait and see what happens at Monaco first, and we'll see what happens. But the heat in Vegas is going to be a problem. That's going to be taxing on the drivers and the cars, because it can get very hot in Vegas. We'll have to see what happens. Basically, that's the best way I can look at the Vegas F1. It is a street circuit. I'm not overly sold on street circuits. F1's been to Vegas before in the past, and it was a bit of an unpopular decision, but Liberty Media is American. There are better. If we're going to go to NASCAR country, go to Charlotte, race on the Roval. It's better than Indy. The infield's better than Indy. It's more fun racing, more even racing. If you want to do a revamped circuit that's had investment, Watkins Glen and Road America, given investment long term, could be a long term solution if you want a third US race. There we go. That's my view on that. I've done a video on it. It's on the channel. So my views on the F1 going to Vegas are up on the channel. Look at my playlists. One of the more recent videos I've done, F1 going to Vegas. Just look at my content. I did it I did a week or so ago when it was announced. So you can watch my views and how I feel about the F1 decision to go to Vegas. It's up on the channel. I could explain it here, but then I'll be just repeating what I've already said in recent live streams. I've obviously got the video up on the channel, so feel free to watch it, and then you can leave your thoughts on what I say, because I understand the commercial aspect, and I understand it is a new location that it's not a new location. They've been there before in the past, but a long time ago. F1 break away from what? It's an FIA sanctioned event, and Liberty Media have the controlling stake. A lot of the issues that F1 have faced were caused by Bernie Ecclestone, though. Now, you've got the Haas F1 team, which is American. You've got American companies who've been sponsoring F1 for decades. And the people who currently own the rights to F1 are Americans. So we shall see what happens. We shall. We'll just have to wait and see. I don't know if there could be a split within F1, the direction it takes. I just don't know. And that one's out of my hands in the sense of I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. Too difficult to predict. I'm not a massive fan of F1 anymore. I don't really follow the sport anymore. Now, the FIA is the global governing body for motorsport. Then you've got the lower ranks like IMSA and then the GT series, but they basically have to comply to FIA standards and rules for safety, so the hands device, roll cages, specialist seats. Even NASCAR is technically sanctioned by the FIA, in the sense that they've got to have minimum safety requirements on their vehicles. Breaking away and starting up a new version of Formula One, again, I don't see it happening. I really don't. There's too much commercial Well, bear in mind you've got um, Jean Todt, uh, ex Ferrari Supremo, obviously involved in the FIA. You've got Stefano Dominicale floating around there as well. That one for me, I yes, there's been threats before, but that's just a couple of manufacturers throwing their weight around. Um, as I see things at the moment, we'll see how this season plays out. We'll see, you know, at the end of the season how close things are. If there's like a Ferrari Red Bull blowout where they're far ahead from the other teams, we'll see how as the season goes on, the teams adapt to the new regulations with the aero package and the engine development, and the new rules that have been various new rules that have been brought in when they develop their cars over the next regulations package over this regulations package until the next one's negotiated with rule changes to the vehicles with new regs. Um, so while the rules as they are over the next couple of years, we'll have to see how the engines are developed, the cars are developed, the aero packages, the chassis, all that, and we'll have to see how the next season or so plays out, and then we'll have a better idea if teams are gonna like look. BMW and Toyota have come in and pulled out. Ford are no longer an engine supplier. Ford Cosworth, basically, back in the day. Um, so big factory teams have been and gone in the last 2 decades. Teams have gone bust quite regularly, actually. Um, the sport needs to become more sustainable. Some of the locations Liberty Media are going to are meeting with backlash, and they've got to balance that up. If non-American fans are feeling so the traditional fan base are feeling disenfranchised, then yeah, we could see changes in the direction the sport is taking. Absolutely. The we've obviously seen all the what I call the Americanization. Um, it's a difficult one, but I've fallen out of love with F1 some time ago. I mean, Liberty Media are at a crossroads. The sport's at a crossroads. Best way to describe it. Now, there's several directions it can take, and several options they can take. We'll have to see what happens. That's the best way to describe it. If some teams feel they can't financially continue and pull out, fair enough. Um, but yeah, as things stand, we'll obviously have to see how things play out over the next couple of seasons. And can Max Verstappen retain his title? Will Sainz or Leclerc win the title? Those kind of questions. Will Hamilton figure out how to be more competitive, or will Mercedes in general figure out how to be more competitive? You know, are the new regs actually making it more balanced and even across all the teams? That kind of thing. We're too early in the season for. It's always controversy with F1. There's always some kind of unnecessary handbags and verbal drama and you know throwing toys out the pram. Um, Last season, the way the season ended was disgraceful. Quite frankly, I do agree with everyone on that. It doesn't matter if it was Max or Lewis, and winning that final race. Um, they that was a just yeah, it wasn't a good look um, at all. And rightly, the fans and sports commentators were blowing up, um, and just left bewildered, like why it finished the way it did. And they're two of the most polarizing drivers as well. They do divide opinion. Not everyone's cup of tea, and you know, uh, it wasn't a good look for the sport. It wasn't a good look for, you know, ha the FIA. It wasn't a good look for the race director who lost his job. Um, it wasn't a good look for some of the teams. Mercedes and Red Bull um, didn't cover themselves in glory either with their responses um, to what happened. And that's what I've got to say on it, really. Like, it's one of them. It's one of them. So um, we'll have to see what happens with F1 going forward and whether they can attract back fans that I've been tuning off. There are fans that have gone, I'm not watching this anymore. I'm watching something else. This is not the sport I enjoyed watching over the last 20, 30 years or 10 years or however long they've been watching. Fans have been left divided over the direction of the sport. So many finals, semi-finals, even quarterfinals we could see in a shock result happen. England France would be a good World Cup final. Um, maybe. Um, Again, that's hypothetical. Hypothetical. Oh, dear. But the way the French played at the Euros last year, they were poor. So has Didier Deschamps taken that French side as far as he can? That's the question. And as I say, a lot can happen between now and the World Cup. Anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. We've been going for 3 hours now. Thank you very much for all your questions. I really appreciate that, and it's good to see some new people in the comment section in the chat. And I always appreciate new people in the chat. It's always good. And as I say, my views on the F1 going to Vegas are up on the channel. I've done a video on that. I mean, and looking at the score lines that are coming in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League, it's great for British football and Villarreal as well in the Champions League this week as well. That can only be a positive for football, I think. And yeah, it shows that if you're going to reformat things, get rid of the UEFA coefficient. I think UEFA. While I agree that the Champions League and European club football does need addressing and reforming, I'm not sold on the direction that UEFA decided. But I do think Sir Alexander Serafin is the right guy, as I say, to take UEFA forward. And I've always said that from day one. He's been very open and honest about the failure of financial fair play. The fact it's taken as long as it has to come up with these new financial rules, though, is a bit frustrating. However, Serafin has realised we need to reform our competitions, our rules. We'll have to see how it all plays out. We'll have to see, how that plays out there. But thank you very much for watching, and I will have some more videos for you very, very soon. Right.